Hello, hello, hello. You are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby Podcast. I am Daragh, this here is Shane.
Hello.
We are two brothers talking all things rugby from the point of view of Leinster and Ireland.
That's right.
We got a big show in store for you guys this week. We had history. History was made
indeed.
last week. The Pumas beat the All Blacks, shock the world, outshone the New Autumn Nations Cup entirely.
Did and all, yeah. Fantastic.
A historic result. We are going to open the show by looking back at that game. After that, we're also going to look ahead to the now massive clash between the Wallabies and the Pumas that's to go on this week. We're also going to look at the Autumn Nations Cup. We're going to look back on last week. We're also going to look ahead to the 3 games this weekend, previewing all of them as well. As well as the club game, we're going to touch on Super Rugby Unlocked. The Mitre 10 Cup playoffs are happening. Premiership is resuming in Europe. We're going to look at all that, as well as actually the Portugal, Brazil are playing each other. Brazil with a 2-test tour of Portugal, so we're going to take a brief look at that as well. And before wrapping up the show at the end of it all with rugby news of the week.
That's it. And for those returning, you're very welcome back. If this is your first time here and you do enjoy the rugby content, do feel free to like and subscribe and share with your rugby loving friends. And also leave a comment down below as well. We do enjoy having a nice rugby based discussion down in the comments thread. So
100%. But I suppose there can't be much more room for ado with a jam-packed show like this.
This is true. Yeah, we will motor on.
Yes, we will.
So the first port of call is looking back on last week. We had what a game. Argentina 25, All Blacks 15.
Wow.
Awesome. Did you see that coming? We sure didn't see that coming.
No, we didn't. I think as evidence would point to. Wow. What an incredible performance from the Pumas.
Top to bottom. They were started with the captain Matera, but they were all so game, so passionate, and it really did just outwork and outfight the All Blacks throughout, as well as outsmart them at times as well. It was a total Argentinian performance.
It was such a confident performance, and looking back on it as well, we had even noted last week that those 2 wins against Australia A were quietly very impressive.
Very, very good. Putting 50 on them the week after. That's
exactly.
Building slowly. Yeah,
totally.
Very impressive.
And absolutely, there perhaps were some warning signs in those games, but just in terms of their approach to the game, it would really bring you back to sort of the roots of rugby. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a tactical masterclass here from Ledesma and the boys. It was good. They played solid rugby, but this was a win built by winning battles, by individuals besting their opponents. And you look right through that team in terms of the forward pack, particularly like Tetes Chaparro getting on top in the scrum, Julian Montoya everywhere, the 2 locks, Alemano and Petty winning contact both sides of the ball, and then the back row everywhere, chopping the All Blacks down.
The amount of tackles that Kramer and Matera got through, as well as Petty as well, I think they were all above in high teens into 20s in tackle count, and they were all mostly dominant tackles as well. It was really combative stuff from the whole pack, and they outshone their All Black counterparts.
Absolutely, sensational. And it was just a question, both sides of the ball, every contact when they had the ball, and especially when they didn't have the ball, the All Blacks weren't able to impose that physical dominance on them because they won all those battles, and then that allowed the backline to shine. Sanchez in particular, I mean,
what a performance.
We didn't really mention him, like when he was at his best and when he has been at his best. You go back to 2015 and perhaps a couple of years prior and maybe a year after as well. In that sort of era, he was a sensational fly half. He was brilliant. He was nice and physical on defence, but a really excellent tactician, a glorious kicker of a football and runner of a backline. One of the most joyous 10s to watch in World Rugby when he's in flow. And we actually got that last week. It was his best performance as far as I'm concerned in years.
It really was.
Managed them around the pitch, and when he's in sync, like outside of maybe Dan Carter, I don't think there's a better 10 to watch when he's running the show.
He's a very flowy man, and they run lovely lines off him as well. I thought he got good help from his centres, including Chocobaris on debut, was just running hard lines to give him options all day. And he just really pulled all of the strings. The little chip over the top that, like, most people know is coming under penalty advantage, that little drop on the toe, but he executed it so well.
Dropped it. I mean, the Wallabies got a try last week from Reece Hodge doing something similar against the All Black Blitz. So absolutely, they were coming coming flying out. He dropped it on a sixpence, got a bit of luck with the bounce, and scooped up, and away you go. But absolutely, it's a lovely play on penalty advantage. But I mean, he was stroking the ball so well,
all day long.
And we there's at times you can be guilty of sort of glossing over the place kicking aspect, but his place kicking was sensational.
Yeah, and it was a difference maker. It edged them out of the contest when they were all over the contest and owning it for the early parts of the game, and then the middle part of the game as well. It was the difference between the teams. The controlling element was coming through Sanchez, but then also good credit to his halfback partner as well, who Cabelli set a lovely tempo. I've had my doubts about Cabelli, but he didn't seem to play an inaccurate pass throughout the whole thing. Got his forward runners to picking the right ones and putting them into space. And then Sanchez pulling the strings outside him. It was a lovely Argentinian performance.
Oh yeah, it was sensational from the two halfbacks in terms of the way they moved the ball around. Wonderful. It's interesting as well that they've talked a little bit about. One of the things they'd said is that in times gone by they've tried to copy other teams, and now they're trying to go back to sort of what is Argentine rugby? We do things slightly different, our own way, sort of very similar to the sort of stuff Eddie Jones was saying about Japan when he was in charge there. Like, we have to create a Japanese form of rugby, and they're talking about creating an Argentine form of rugby, and it was so passionate, it was so based on work rate, they were so organised and together as a unit. But just seeing sort of the passion, and then coming from the passion, the focus and drive that they all had, and the synchronization that they all had, putting everything into every play, sort of very much wearing on the nose that they're putting their heart and soul out there for their country. It's what's inspired the world, Matera with that comment to Angus Gardner
early in the game,
saying like, I'm playing for my country, they must show respect. That kind of stuff, like,
brilliant.
We have, especially with the lack of crowds up north, we haven't really seen that same level of sort of drive coming from teams. A lot of teams are more process driven, like to sort of stay above that fray, but they really embraced it. And it wasn't even a question of picking the All Blacks apart tactically, as I say, like they did. And this is why they didn't go to the corner off penalties. They didn't try and like rack up a score. It wasn't that case of an underdog team, as you often point out, having to take tries. It was a case of a team who believed they could just get on top of the All Blacks and were just determined to win every play and every moment.
What is that you say, when you're kicking 3-pointers, it takes a lot of winning the game, but they won that game in a lot of areas. They won most of the game. They won it all. Like, the All Blacks only fired their shots late on, and it wasn't a case of this being an underdog team. It's like we've seen with Argentina, the fact that they're not travelling, they're in a camp. They had weeks to prepare. They had 2 games leading into it, and like we see them in World Cup form. Obviously last year was a bit disappointing for them, but generally when they arrive at a World Cup, certainly their autumn form is nothing to go on. Even their rugby championship form sometimes, because they're being jetting around all over the globe, and surely jet lag and fatigue is a factor. Didn't seem to be here at all, and it just meant that they managed to get their processes
for that long, and everyone's fit and everybody's healthy. It's actually a great and unique thing for these guys, obviously exploited to the fullest degree. I mean, they seemed so comfortable with each other and trusting each other.
100%, and even little setbacks like Carreras going off in the first half from fullback, but then Imhoff is able to kind of marshal that back three as well. It was just a very assured performance from a team that we hadn't seen all year.
Born of limiting the opportunities for the All Blacks to get into the game, and we will touch on the All Blacks obviously as well. They had their own situation in the game, but from a Pumas point of view, in terms of the raw stats, their missed tackle count was extremely low. I'm not sure exactly what it was. I think Justin Marshall was saying they didn't miss a tackle all game, but it looked like they missed some.
We did see some missed tackles for sure, but it was a small degree. Certainly in the multi-phase they were very comfortable.
But they were making tackles and making dominant tackles, and then on the ball, one handling error in the whole game. That just sucks the All Blacks out. I mean, the All Blacks at the moment, we were talking about them last week, trying to shock the Pumas, return to test rugby style. They weren't able to do that. The Pumas stopped them from imposing their physicality, limited the number of opportunities they gave them off turnover, and as a result the All Blacks just didn't have the tools to respond, and they could all day try and run around the corner, try and carry through the middle of them, and the Pumas just were not relenting. They were so ready for this game. They'd done a job, for example, on Caleb Clark, who was getting like the Jonah Lomu treatment. If you go back to like 95 World Cup final, every time he was getting the ball there were Pumas swarming on
converging him, around him, and
he never got anything
space
off.
It's true.
And Artie Sevilla likewise, every time he got the ball he was
quiet.
Swarmed, attacked, stopped.
They were game for that fight in the tight areas, and the All Blacks were made to rue just the fact that they've been leaning on their physicality. It was what saw them over in that Bledisloe thing. The difference between the sides was All Black physicality when it came to the Wallabies, but the Pumas were more than ready for it and more than a match. They managed to look collectively just very dangerous on probing offense. Didn't necessarily manifest itself in tries, but they scored more than the All Blacks, and it won little battles.
Yielded pressure, but they did this at set piece, they did this at the breakdown, they did this with the ball and without the ball. They yielded pressure, got on top of their opposite man, and then the All Blacks relented and gave penalties away.
Yeah.
And that played them into the game. And then Sanchez kicked them over. I mean, that was it. It was just a really straightforward, winning every battle type of victory. And from an All Black point of view, like, losing every battle is a serious problem as well.
No, it's true. Yeah, I suppose we can move forward to the All Blacks, because obviously, as much as this is a great and famous win for the Argentinians, it's a pretty grisly and irritating defeat for an All Black fan and for the All Blacks in general.
There's sort of uproar in the camp this week. I mean, since it's happened, Sam Cane has had a pop at some fans for having a pop at him, or having a pop
pops back everywhere,
popping away. But I mean, it's something that It's something that's actually longer in the making, this undoing of the All Blacks, than just Foster, and it dates back, I think, to Hansen. I think you're starting to see some Kiwi fans saying this, that really since the Lions tour and since that noticeable change that they went on when they tried to beat the Lions up front, instead of sort of embracing their old school run the ball around them. They were kicking threes, trying to win forward battles, and they ended up drawing the series.
Yes, ignominiously for themselves, and it has kind of manifested itself in a new style of play for them.
Exactly, they've gone more and more down that threshold, and they've been less and less creative in terms of the centres. Most of their tries in terms of creativity in the run game aren't coming off multi-phase or even first phase. They're coming off turnover ball and chaos
kick
plays,
return, that kind of stuff.
Which is always it's a lovely thing that they have, and it's still a lovely thing that they have.
It's a huge asset, yeah.
But when it's dropped, when teams limit their errors, when teams don't play them into the game, or even
when they stuff the first phase, they even a couple of times in this game they managed to pounce on a kick that wasn't necessarily loose. It still found grass, but at the times that they looked most cohesive was the one phase when they just gathered the kicked ball, and then they all suddenly snapped into focus and managed to make a few yards. But as soon as the guys tackled, then the multi-phase offense comes in, and it just becomes a bit more stagnant for them.
It's something that's been missing for a while, and what they've done this year, what they did in Bledisloe, and what you saw them even doing in games gone by, it's what sort of you saw England sort of paint this picture against them as well last year, where they just could not win a contact, and then they couldn't do anything. Is that there actually isn't a lot of shape to the back line.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get the impression that they're running clever shapes. Like, it's very much 10, 12, 13. Sometimes you get pods of forwards and Ardi Savio on the wing, but they're not running patterns. They're not like, there's not basic screen shapes. It's not like watching England where guy gets the ball, everyone knows their job. There's a pod here. Different guys are picking different lines. The out half has an idea of who he's going to fix and who he's going to give the ball to, but he can change that up and pick another option depending on what's right.
Yeah.
And then the passing is crisp from there. The All Blacks very much play heads up rugby, and that's sort of what they're coached and disciplined to do. But without winning those forward battles and without any real structure, when it's in a multi-phase situation, when you're in the middle of the field with ruck ball and you're up against a team that are flying at the line, not missing tackles, not giving you an inch, it just yields no creativity. And you don't have a situation where you've Barrett and Moonga in the background and they're not linking up with one another.
They're not linking up on the multi-phase, especially. There's a disconnect, and it starts with the centres. I was initially critical of Moonga for his lack of control during the game, but then on rewatching some of it, the lines all day that were run off him from the centres were rubbish. They were either like right beside him where you couldn't pass to them, but they were smothering the space and they're both running at the same channel, or they were just tight lines, like narrow cutting lines that are kind of in the passing lane for Barrett out wide, so you have to pick one of them, and none of them's the killer line. Like, you can, there is such a thing as the killer line where you can come straight in on a hard one and manage to find the gap, but they weren't really. They were just trucking it up, and then they were very often behind the gain line, and it was stifled, no rhythm in it.
And that yields... That's a problem that comes from a lack of shape, in my view. Like, I think they need to have just a little bit of structure to what they're doing on offense, and then within that, the All Black players are still talented enough that they know what to do when the 4-on-3s come.
Oh, for sure.
And when
see it on kick
when the open space comes. But what's happening in the multi-phase is they have to try and work those in. And what they did against Australia in those games that they won was owned the contact area, owned the game,
smashed them back.
Patrick Tuipulotus and the like were just on top of it, and Argentina didn't give that to them.
No, if anything, they outworked them there. Like, Petty was more impressive than Tuipulotu, and even Whitelock as well. Alan Nana was probably more impressive in the contact zone. They were just, as soon as they're met there, they're not as big and strong as all these other packs. Like, that's why it's probably wrong-headed. And it was something that was annoying us about Ireland as well, in terms of our approach going into the last World Cup, looking at how overly physical we were kind of making the point of focus for the game plan. And it's like, yeah, that's going to work against most teams for sure. You're bigger than most teams, but you're not bigger than the Springboks. You're not bigger than England. You're probably not even bigger than Wales if you're the All Blacks thing. And it's like, what are you doing this for? What are your main assets? Like, your main asset used to be just being faster and being more skillful. Whereas, like, if you're going to try and bully teams, you're going to bully the majority of teams. You can get away with it against sometimes the Wallabies, but any tier 2 side as well. But it's probably not the wisest course in terms of utilising your assets and staying true to yourselves. Sure, compliments going to Argentina for trying to rediscover their own flair and how they want to play the game, marrying really good scrum dominance in that game with silky backs and lovely assured halfbacks and a good footballing instinct. The All Blacks need to rediscover what they're about.
They do 100%. And I mean, it's more difficult obviously when you haven't got. I mean, if I was to pick out a few, I would say, like, if you go back to the 2015 team, you know, Nonu's, Sonny Bill Williams, Conrad Smith and Ben Smith now gone as well. Those are guys who haven't been replaced. And when you look at what's coming in behind, like, I'm especially thinking, like, Damien McKenzie comes off the bench again and he's completely frozen out of the game. I don't hate, in fact, I quite like the Barrett Mo'unga if they could ever just link up.
Yeah.
I don't like... Geordie Barrett's a guy they keep getting in there who I think isn't really a very good offensive player. He's not a very good All Black style fullback. And then the two centres, obviously, Goodhue and Leonard Brown, just not distributing, not creating, no kind of form.
Not even dominating collision zones
no kind of form between the two of them as well. And so they really do have things to ponder, because the Laumape and Geordie Barrett option in behind is actually more bludgeoning and less creative even than what's there now.
Yes.
So they
That's
definitely...
why we were excited about Rico in the 13 channel, and he showed good form for the Blues, but then granted he did kind of botch his chance with that drop ball, and that's several bad plays.
Well, one wonders if they're going to go back to him, because you know that took place in a drawn game. They've lost twice since then. But they're going to have to figure something out in the centres, and they're going to have to work some shape into their attack. It is simply not enough to say we trust our boys to play. When you're working a multi-phase, it's just not going to work like that.
No, the game's kind of moved on from that.
Yeah, and you don't have the Nonus and the Sonny Bill Williams and the Ben Smith. You have great players. Yeah. I'd love to see them get Will Jordan out there, get the form guys out there.
Where's he been? He's been...
But they don't actually have the raw, like, supreme dominant talent that they had in that era to make that kind of laissez-faire attitude to attacking structure work.
Yes,
against good defences.
Yeah, and game defences, which is what they were facing here. And they were just constantly outworked, outmatched everywhere.
Yeah.
Just a special mention to Dane Coles as well, who put in... My God, I love Dane Coles, but it was his worst performance I've seen from him in an All Black shirt. We saw none of his...
The slap in the face
penalty reversal. That's just every bat, and you see that instinct in him. He is prickly and combative, which can be a good thing, but we didn't see any of his running or distribution game. They didn't really put him in that channel. And then the whole front row that they picked as well, what was it, Moody, Coles and Lomax.
Missed
Tuongafasi in a big way. That was shorn of heft, and it's just... They had Dane Coles in the tight channels where he's not at his best. It was a kind of a disjointed mess of a thing, the overall, but the front row was a little microcosm of it, I thought. And they lost their scrum battle. Yeah, indeed. And with the encouraging thing, obviously, to go back to the history of it, the Pumas now add themselves to the list of teams. They had never beaten the All Blacks. They have done so now. 29 attempts, I think, is it? Yes, which was curiously the exact same amount of attempts it took Ireland to beat the All Blacks. Ireland beat them on match number 29 as well. There you go. We know how good it can feel. Yeah, congratulations in a neutral venue as well. So it's cool. It was honestly, it was so heartwarming to see that there were presumably Sydney-based Argentine supporters in the stands. Yes, and they were great, jumping up and down, bringing song and bringing colour. Yeah, something that the Aussie fans and the All Black fans might have been bamboozled by, the chanting and the noise out of them was fantastic. Are they hovering over the Black Betty button to just drown them out with a bit of... Well, indeed, but they bring phenomenal colour to the game, and having a Pumas side and that, you know, all of South American rugby is coming, as we've seen, but a Pumas side in particular that can mix it with the best is just a really great thing for our game. They bring so much colour and innovation and a new flavour of rugby to it. So it just makes for a much more exciting Tri-Nations tournament. And it does. Blows it right open. Yeah, and I think you have to be very, very excited for the Pumas and for Southern Hemisphere rugby to see them pull off a performance like that. Some phenomenal players, and I think gone are the days
where the Pumas are going to be considered rank outsiders, or at least one would hope in this competition.
No, I think they may have quelled that for quite comprehensively with that performance, and I'm looking forward to the game this week. Sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Congratulations, Pumas.
Congratulations. Yes, there were a load of areas in the All Black team that were there to be exploited, even in the games that they were winning against the Wallabies, and we were kind of half pointing them out when we were like, oh yeah, they won, they look good, but I'm curious to see what happens if they get matched in this area, in that area, and this area. And the Pumas did their homework so well, they stayed so focused, and they came out and they beat them up in every single one of those key areas, owned the game, and you can't say anything else other than just a massive congratulations to them and fair play. Serious team.
Absolutely.
Vamos los Pumas.
Vamos los Pumas. Okay, with that we will move on, because there's more Tri Nations rugby to preview, because we're looking ahead to this weekend's game. It is Argentina versus Australia. Now, I know, granted, it is in Australia, the whole tournament's taking place in Australia, but this is Argentina's home fixture against them.
Yes, allegedly so. It is to take place this coming Saturday. It's morning time here in Dublin for us. It's going to be at 8:45 a.m.
Lovely.
Which is much better than the 6 a.m. we were treated to last week.
We'll be grateful for it.
That's actually a quarter to 8 p.m. local time, so it's an evening game out in Australia.
Yeah.
This is at McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle City in New South Wales, which is just north of Sydney.
Right. Yeah.
Referees to be Paul Williams.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And the weather conditions actually are set for to be absolutely lovely.
That sounds nice, doesn't it?
As summer approaches in Australia, it's going to be some light winds, but 21 degrees Celsius and sunny. So I think both sides are going to be delighted with that. This is a pure rugby match between teams who want to run and be physical. I
want to try and make a run at some silverware for the first time in God knows how long. They're both in with a shout. That's just one of the flavours to this game. I mean, the tournament itself has just been blown wide open by what the Pumas did last weekend. Yeah. Like, really, the All Blacks were, prior to that game, thinking they were just kind of coast with their bonus point scenario to another rugby championship.
And now they have 2 losses in their first 2 weeks of the tournament. Is that right? Or no, they've played 3 games now, so they've got 1 win and 2 losses.
That's right. A losing record for the All Blacks in this tournament. That's an unusual place to be.
And how often do you get 2 teams playing each other whose previous encounter was a win over the All Blacks?
Yes, I can't remember that ever happening. They're both coming in fresh from beating the All Blacks and facing each other.
It's a serious game, and both will be just ecstatic at the prospect of winning some silverware. You forget, obviously, with the Pumas outshining everything, just how confident the Wallabies are looking, how good that win was for their morale, how they're starting to figure things out under Dave Rennie.
100%, yeah.
One of the funny historical things is that the Tri Nations was disbanded after 2011, and so the Wallabies have liked to claim anyway that they're reigning Tri Nations champions.
Yes, because they won it
it in 2011, and then it's been the 4 nations since then. So now the Tri Nations has come back, and they have an opportunity to secure it again for perhaps the next forever, so that's definitely a fun one as well. And obviously the Pumas have never won the tournament. They've never won serious major silverware.
That's true. Even the Jaguares the year prior got close, agonisingly close to the Super Rugby, but came second in the end.
Yeah, and yet they've never looked in better shape. I mean, the evidence of that first game, I mean, obviously a lot of passion, a lot of energy went into that game, and the questions do linger about how well and how easily that can be maintained over a 4-week period, and what kind of depth they have in their squad group, because you looked in the stands and there was a whole host of players who were in that squad camp who presumably might have to be given some chance over the next 4 weeks.
Well, considering you can't ask someone to do 4 weeks in a row.
Well, certainly you can't ask like Kramer and Matera to make 25 tackles 4 tests in a row. It's going to be very, very difficult for them. So the depth of the squad is going to come into it in terms of winning the game. But you could argue they've never been better placed to claim some silverware.
It's probably true. Yeah, like a win over the All Blacks will put you in better shape than you've ever been before, considering they hadn't done it. So it's just a very, very exciting occasion for both teams, and I expect both of them to just be absolutely bulling for each other on the very opening whistle. And considering the attitude both of these teams like to play with, they like to throw the ball around, couple that with the weather conditions, the locale, it's all set for just a really exciting game of footy.
Absolutely, yeah. You'd be buzzing for it. In terms of the squads for this game, obviously we haven't had any announced. Actually, we might have some announced by the end of the show if we're lucky, so we'll scout around before we finish up and maybe come back. But what we do know is that James O'Connor is still out for the Wallabies.
Yes.
So it seems likely that Reece Hodge will maintain his positions, filling in there for...
Try that, another chance for Lolesio, possible?
I would suspect... I would be very... I think Reece Hodge should be playing anyway.
Yeah.
And then the question is what you do in the centres, whether you stick with Paisami and Pataya, or whether you bring Irai Simoni back in there or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That would be my frame of mind. You could conceivably do Lolesio at 10 and Hodge at 12.
So definitely an option. They do have options. They might
have,
considering he's just fresh off a wonderful performance and beating the All Blacks. Then why would you change that? To be honest,
the other interesting dynamic is that a star of the NRL, who admittedly I haven't seen, but apparently there's quite a bit of hype about. This guy who's been playing in National Rugby League in Australia, Suliasi Vunivalu, who I must have Fijian origin. He's been added to the Wallabies squad, although I would say he seems unlikely to edge out Tom Wright and Corabetti after that performance against the All Blacks.
Yeah, and you still have Daugunu as well in the auxiliary wings, so they do have options there for sure. And do I see one other bit of squad thing? Obviously Lachlan Swinton, fresh off his red card offence,
he's done for the year.
He's done for the year, so they will have to figure out something else to do with that jersey.
I would say EC Naisarani had a couple of tries against Argentina for Australia A, and if you looked for Australia A against Argentina, that's right. He was picking off the base of the scrum for a couple of them. He was gaining yards. He was playing at number 8 obviously in that game. But one wonders whether he could slot in, if you could even move Wilson to 6 or him to 6. Sure. Either way, I think that'd be a decent shout.
They may end up going with Ned Hannigan though,
or Liam Wright, and then maybe Naisarani on the bench. I mean, they definitely have options there. Yeah. Ned Hannigan was doing media, so he might be in the squad, or in the starting berth. But I would like to see them persist with Simmons and Phillip
in the second row for sure. Yeah. Go ahead. We were just going to pivot on to Argentina's defence, I guess.
Argentina's attack.
Argentina's attack, I should say. Yes, we start with how they want to go about moving the ball.
Start positively. But we're going to look at the match first of all from Argentina's point of view. They are allegedly the home side.
Yes, indeed.
And starting with how do they want to break this Wallaby defence down?
Yeah, well, it's a tough ask considering the Wallabies have been fronting up pretty consistently. I think things start with Cubelli and Sanchez as they did before. Those guys are going to have to pull the strings. They're going to have to bring a pretty aggressive kicking game to try and, as we said, there are a few debutants on the wings or near debutants for the Wallabies as well. So they do want to test that backfield coverage for sure, especially if Sanchez is stroking it well. But for me, the big question is just in the contact area: are they going to bring the same heft and just will?
Yeah, it wasn't. There was no rocket science to last week's performance. They have good offensive instincts. They play with a lot of flow, but they were all about linking up with one another and winning their battles. So can the likes of Guido Petty, they arguably have more physicality on last week's showing than the Wallabies have brought all year.
Yeah.
And when the Wallabies have struggled in the Bledisloe tests is when they've kind of been blown away physically.
Yes.
So there's definitely a case to be made for getting Petty on the ball, getting Kramer on the ball, getting these guys...
Bruni and...
even Montoya.
Yeah.
Latching off each other and getting good go forward ball. And from there they're very good at developing a nice flow.
Yes.
They're very good at moving defenders around. One thing that the All Blacks didn't really do is really put a squeeze on their defence in the centres.
No.
I mean, Australia have been chopping and changing their centres. They've had, on numerous occasions, they've had Paisami and Pataya together, 2 out-and-out 13s, neither of whom is really a big hitter.
Yeah.
One wonders if Argentina, with a bit of flow and a bit of creativity, they've got Chocobaras in there, a lovely bit of footwork on him, lovely passer of a ball.
He's kind of a hard carrier as well. He's a hard tackler and a hard carrier, and Orlando is a lovely silky player.
Orlando has always cut a nice line for as long as he's played for them, so I would love to see them probing in that area. And then obviously, as you say, the glorious flowy distribution game of Sanchez that you would hope to see on the same kilter, where he's just reading the defence constantly. If it flies up, he's putting kicks in behind, he's seeing the space, he very much is the guiding light. Cubelli driving a nice tempo and Sanchez being the general and dictating the flow of the game and how Argentina are approaching it.
Yeah.
Because if they can probe and get outside those centres, they have absolutely lethal guys in the wing.
They do.
Regardless of, I think Carreras might be gone, but Imov and Santiago Cordero and Delguy, all brilliant players with real actually the decent records in this competition as well against these teams scoring tries.
Yeah, they do. It can tend to operate a little wider, these games, just historically the Pumas and the Wallabies both like to fling the ball out there, so I expect a bit more opportunity for those wingers and that back three unit as a whole than they saw against the All Blacks, because credit where it's due, the All Blacks did a good job of shutting down the outside a little, so it became about Sanchez kind of probing in different areas and the centres fronting up and winning their carries when they were forced to. But this time they may have a chance to get
There's more opportunity. I mean, they put 50 on Australia A. They'll be very confident about their ability to move them around, get their classy offensive players on the ball and really ask questions of the defence. And if there's missed tackles from Australia, they're really good. Argentina are really good at offloading and running great tracking lines and turning line breaks into points. And that's definitely
they do transition well, and they identify space very well. So it'll be on them to read that opportunity and be there to take it. But again, the key one is just, are they winning those collisions in the same way with the same ferocity? Are they bringing the same pitch to this battle? Because if they do, I suspect you're probably right. They probably do have a little bit more heft to them than this Wallaby side. So I hope to see them get on top of them and then create their offense thereafter. That's
absolutely. Well, one of the areas that really was the hallmark of the Pumas last week, I should say, was on defence. Marcus Kramer, like we went through all these guys, but Kramer up there in particular
made so many tackles, to be fair to him.
And then Pablo Matera on the jackal, constantly in there, constantly annoying. They brought such an intensity and such a physicality and a dominance to the contact area that it shocked the All Blacks. And the Australians, as good as they are in many areas, probably not as tough as the All Blacks in those areas. So they will, like, if they can bring a fight when the Wallabies have the ball and stop them at source, that could be massive for them. And then, like, getting on top of the Wallabies in the narrow channels and forcing them to kick is very much a nice picture.
If they can kind of slow their ruck down and remove the options for Nick White, especially, because White has had to, like, with the absence of James O'Connor, it's had to come a bit more off 9, even with Hodge doing his best at 10. He's not now 10, so Nick White becomes kind of their petit general mould of things. So disrupting that guy is obviously pivotal. And then a big job again for the centres. I'm just going to highlight them because Chocobaras did brilliantly on debut, but we did highlight that the All Blacks, despite being the All Blacks, didn't really test them in the midfield. They didn't really run any of those probing lines, and to credit where it's due, Dave Rennie's Wallabies have sat a little deeper than the All Blacks in the first few tests, and tended to go a little wider a little sooner. So certainly if you have a young guy who's maybe over eager in Chocobaras shooting and fracturing from his line, I think the Wallabies will spot that space. So it's kind of a big job for him to rein that in between Sanchez and Orlando leadership role, and maybe shooting might not be as effective as just kind of staying cohesive.
And keeping their width and forcing owning those contacts on the inside allows them to keep width and forces the Wallabies to earn the right to go wide, which is where it gets difficult for them. But you're right, the Wallabies in overall in Bledisloe, you could argue were perhaps more creative, and they were played at a quicker tempo and went wider, and certainly when Nick White was able to stamp his authority on the game, there was a lovely flow to their attack. They were, as you say, sitting deeper, moving the ball. White was getting to breakdowns and shifting it very quickly. And they managed to work their way around the size of the All Blacks with a bit of speed. Now that's obviously they at times can get a little lethargic on their ball placement, and they can get over the gain line and leave an opportunity there to steal some ball. Tuanga Fassi, I remember having a field day for the All Blacks. Argentina were so good last week at that. That's definitely going to be an area they go at again. But they do have to be concerned about the wide game. I mean, the Wallabies have a lot of runners in the wide channels who are actually really, really smart operators and are surprisingly good in the contact. Like a battle between Orlando and Pataya is potentially dangerous.
Pretty pivotal. I think Orlando has a huge job, a bigger job than he had last week in this instance, because Pataya is kind of their key distributing force at 13 to access that wide channel. So his telepathy with his back three, like bringing the wingers up or not, that'll all kind of fall at Orlando's door, as it often does with the 13 on D, because the back three will have to be aware that the Wallabies do kick a lot of ball. We've been annoyed at the Wallabies for kicking a lot of balls, so they will have to mind their backfield. But identifying the times when Orlando is maybe a little short-sighted, it'll be a big leadership role for all of them, because they will test them out wide.
So and they're also like, the dominant contacts that Argentina made were very impressive, but they were in the areas that the All Blacks were trying to play.
Yeah.
Like it's perhaps not going to be Pablo Matera out there trying to tackle Corey Betty. It's going to be Del Guy and how he does on defence and how they do in their tackle completion rate as well, and making sure that they keep the discipline up that the back row and the forwards are bringing is going to be massive.
Still a
because Australia are going to ask different questions.
Yes, they are.
So from a defensive point of view, being sharp in the tackle in those areas where there's more space and you have your less physical guys out there, that's a real test for them, and that's definitely one of the big question marks ahead of this. Are they going to be softer in the wide channels than they were in the tight where the All Blacks went after them?
This is true. And also, will Sanchez be forced to make a load of tackles in his channel as well? I suspect the Wallabies might move their runners a little wider out, because Sanchez does tend to defend in the line. He's very courageous that way, but the system just has him in the line. So the Wallabies might send him down that channel. A little bit of savvy would put a back row forward there to just support him. Like, he'll probably make his tackle and then have a guy there to poach, be it Matera, or not to punish them for hitting. If you can teach them early that running at Sanchez is a turnover, that'll just, you don't want Sanchez taking multiple contacts.
Sanchez, historically speaking, I mean, there was one year where he was the top tackler in the Rugby Championship,
which is like impressive as a 10, but on a macro scale, why is your 10 making a load of tackles?
And the other factor, obviously, is just that he's a little older and he can't take as many contacts, like an old quarterback. When you're young and you're a rookie, you can do all this running into guys, but when you're getting on in age, you got to mind yourself a bit more.
This is true.
And he's at his best when he's got all of himself present and he's not rattled and he's just able to control and see the game.
Exactly.
And boy, he was so good last week. If he can replicate that performance, it'll be a joy to watch. He looked like the best 10 in the world last week.
He did. So flowy, such a tempo and such control. I suppose we'll move out to where a real battle will happen, is in the set piece. Because both of these sides have been impressive in the set piece thus far. The Wallabies have really upped their game at scrum time.
They have.
Really have. They found some really quality tight heads and some good scrummagers.
And quality loose heads as well. I think you really do have to give the shout out to James Slipper. I mean, his scrummaging has been nice and aggressive, and likewise on the Pumas side, Teta Shaparo as well. The real factor is going to be which of the engine rooms is stronger, which is why you would really be looking for the Wallabies to keep the Simmons and Phillip combination going strong.
Yes.
And also how the tight heads hold up, because one would assume that the Wallabies are going to keep going with the holding off of Tupou to unleash him. Maybe not.
It's possible they don't.
It's possible they mix it up and give him the start, especially against a Pumas team that likes to play with so much energy.
Yes.
It could be a very, very fortunate picture for the Wallabies if Tupou's getting on top of them.
Yeah, that seems ambitious to my estimation.
No, I think he's best unleashed from the bench.
I think so too.
And especially with a guy as solid as Alatoa. They might back
him
to lock down the scrum.
Certainly, I think it's key to pick Simmons for one thing, because their scrum is so much better with 2 locks rather than 1.5.
Yes.
But when they have those 2 locks, then as you say, he's a really good tight head at just fundamentally locking the scrum down, which is all you'll want to do against a bullish offensive Pumas side, who in the last game their starting front row were excellent but did play 70 minutes, all of them, which doesn't show.
They also scrum a bit maniacally, which is like it's lovely and flowy and dynamic, and everything the Pumas did was with energy and passion, but including their scrum, like the scrums were
pulsing
like,
a lot of the time.
Exactly, because like their Teta Shaparo and the whole Argentine front row is like shifting levels and jimmying at arms. And if the Wallabies can be solid, then all of a sudden, the chance comes in that the Pumas bring it down, or they slip, or they make a mistake, an unforced error. And if this is correctly refed by who do we say the ref was? Paul Williams. Well, he's not going to look at the scrum, is he?
This is the issue.
But no, you can get, like, if it's a very obvious picture where someone is jimmying the scrum and then goes to deck, it's like, well, clearly he's given away a penalty.
Exactly.
And that could be a factor if the Wallabies can lock down that scrum. So it's definitely going to be an area of intrigue.
Yeah, I think the Wallabies will be looking to try and lock it down and keep it parity for most of it. And then if you are springing a guy like Tupou off the bench, then maybe a few penalties come in the last quarter, and that could see you home. Because the Pumas have been very aggressive in that area, both traditionally the more aggressive scrummagers of the two nations, and I just think it'll be quite a dynamic battle. And then the line-out drive is key for both of them as well. I think the maul has been a useful asset for both. It's certainly a strike play that both of them go to in the 22.
I mean, the Pumas maul was sensational at the World Cup, and it doesn't look to have lost any of its importance and any of its flair. I mean, the Montoya tries, he was the top try scorer at the World Cup at some point, and they got a couple off against the All Blacks. I mean, with the pack weight of Australia, I should say, the sort of occasional slightness to them and the difficulties they've had on ball defence.
That's true.
I would imagine that that's going to be an area the Pumas go to.
Well, I think both of them might go on the offense. I think the Wallabies.
I haven't really seen much of it from the Wallabies.
Well, they tried a few in those tests against the All Blacks before they were stopped, and then kind of moved on to launching off it. But I think they will try it again with new opponents, because the Brumbies, as we have said, do have a legit maul. I think it'll be a lot of it will be more on maul defense for both teams. Are the Argentinians going to be aware to that threat and be ready to stop it?
It was the one area the All Blacks managed to make a play against them in the last day, and they did that with a quick play. They caught them off guard, and it was actually very sharply scored.
And to be honest, the Wallabies and Dave Rennie can be quick in those kinds of set piece. They can focus their mind and do a deceptive quick play. 100%. So maul defence will be huge for both of them. But then similarly in the midfield, when you're not mauling, both of these sides do like to get good clean ball off the top to get their backs moving forward, especially in the middle third. So it's very important. Obviously, both hookers will be looking to secure the ball. Wallabies had a few hiccups, but kind of remedied that.
You think Payangamosa is the solution?
He has been the solution thus far. Certainly in the first test, the darts were more worrying than they had been in the previous three or the following three. Meanwhile, Montoya was just pretty perfect.
As he has been, he's just a phenomenal player. I mean, he's come in, backed up Cravey with just another excellent hooker. I mean, he's been really perhaps the unsung hero of Argentina, although he was sung when he was scoring those maul tries, but he's a really, really tidy operator.
Absolutely, and a good scrummager too. They do like to scrummage spearhead through their two in terms of the focus of the drive, and he can manage that. He's physical enough. And then just the final restart as well is the territory game starts with, or the final set piece I should say, is the restart. Which kind of dictates. It doesn't decide anything, but it does give a slight edge in the territory game when one side can get on top.
Well, it's one of the things that the Wallabies should focus on, because the Pumas took a lot of 3-pointers and they were able to exit pretty easy against the All Blacks. Like if the Wallabies should be thinking, let's make it difficult for the Pumas to rack up a score even if they're edging battles. So obviously discipline's going to be important there, but if they can launch a very effective restart into the corner of the 22 and force the Pumas to kick under pressure, that really does stop them and stymie their ability to build a score with 3-pointers, because if they've only gotten 3 and then they can't really exit and get their hands on the ball, and Australia get to start the next offense, maybe they can even chalk the 3 off or add a try to it. So I think that's definitely a crucial dynamic that the All Blacks didn't get right, that the Wallabies might look at if the Pumas are going to give them a lot of chances to kick the ball off.
Yeah, we'll just see how that plays out, but it is an interesting one to watch, particularly in the first quarter. I think the restarts, because it gives you an insight into the tactics for both sides. But speaking of, we'll move on to the Wallabies then, the away team in theory. How are they going to attack the Pumas? And as we kind of alluded to earlier, depth and tempo is kind of the key here. Like maintaining their depth and spacing so that they have opportunities to get around them or through them if you have a guy like Chocobaras fracturing the line by coming forward too keenly, putting runners into that space. But the tempo is going to start with the contact, but then kind of pivot through Nick White, who has been so key for them. He's been brilliant, to be honest, at dictating that tempo and getting them moving with verve and enthusiasm and purpose. So the Argentinians will be trying to upset that, but it's on the forwards to win their collisions, get quick ball, kind of reduce ruck speed and move the pill around. And
I think definitely checking the Pumas line speed is going to be huge here. The Pumas kept their width and won tackles so well, so I think the kicking game of Hodge in particular is going to be absolutely massive here. Is he going to be putting bombs in the sky for them to chase? Is he going to be finding little bits of grass to kick it in behind? He's got a great boot on him, likewise Tom Banks. If they can work those guys into the line and just check the line speed that the Pumas are bringing, that's going to be huge.
Test their pendulum as well, because obviously with Carreras going off and Boffelli still not available,
it was the one area
without a fullback.
It was actually while Carreras was on the field, but it was the one time that the All Blacks really did get some purchase off, was a little kick in behind that Carreras didn't really deal with in the first half. So and Aaron Smith actually had some success from some box kicks as well, although obviously from an All Black point of view you're like, why are you box kicking all the time? But he did have some success with them, and that might be an area that the Wallabies go to if the Pumas are bringing that pressure. But I think first and foremost, it's like we talked about with what the Pumas have to do to shut things down. Getting the ball into the hands of the likes of Pataya is going to be massive.
That's their focus.
Getting the ball to the wide channels, exciting guys like Wright and Corabetti need to be brought into the game, and exactly, just moving it away, holding your depth and moving it away from the big tough back row forwards, and trying to win contacts against the smaller backs is going to be huge here.
Yeah, and resourcing that when you do as well.
And bringing some shape. They bring more shape than the All Blacks. You know, they like to bring their blindside wingers off the wing. They like to run some screen plays. They run some very deceptive little, especially off first and second phase, they run some very deceptive little plays.
Yes.
And
little inside balls with two men hitting them,
having
and you picking the right
10
guy.
and wing, 10 wing and centre break to the blind side in one moment, and trying to exploit them that way. Just being much more creative and showing a lot more variety than the All Blacks did, to really like ask proper questions in this defence, rather than just trying to hit up. I don't think they should be trying that at all.
No,
really.
I don't really think that's like, it's kind of earned the right to go narrow rather than the other way around. Because the guys, you don't want to run into Petty all day, because he'll tackle you all day. Similarly, Matera, Kramer, all of these guys are game for it. But what you do want to do, and what you want to see if you're a Wallaby fan, is the likes of Kramer or Matera shooting up, identifying who they think the runner is, and going to the other guy, and then just having them be a bit more hesitant the next phase when they want to make a proactive hit, but there's so much deception and speed and depth on the ball that they can't really come forward out of the line, and then they're a little on their heels, and that's when you can get that Wallaby tempo that has been so terrifying when they've got it right, even against the mighty All Blacks so thus far.
Yeah, 100%. They're very creative, and they definitely have tries out there to be scored against the Pumas. So this is why it's such an exciting game. It is very much, I think it's going to be an honest game played. It's going to be like a ding-dong battle, and going to be about which offense gets more off, which defense gets on top. From a defensive point of view for the Wallabies, it's definitely a tough job. I mean, the Pumas, full of energy, are going to be running at them, and are going to be they move the ball so sharply. And if the Wallabies try and front up by flying out of the line, Sanchez is going to drop kicks in behind. He's going to try and find grass. He's going to probe. It's definitely a tough ask for the Wallabies, but it's not a dissimilar equation to what they were looking at against the All Blacks in terms of the initial job being, don't let them get on top of you physically. Don't give them yards.
Don't concede penalties at set piece. Try and shore all that stuff up and make your first up tackles. If every 1 in 3 or 4 hits can be a dominant Wallaby hit on defence, that should be enough to disrupt the Pumas into kicking. That's what they're looking to try and do. They want to repel some of that. They certainly can't allow the Pumas' physicality to overwhelm them or surprise them. Because we've seen in the test that they lost to the All Blacks, some of it was just first up tackling that wasn't being made or wasn't being dominant, and that was where the seams started to appear. But once they did make that first up hit, their defensive cohesion was actually very good.
Yeah, held its width nicely, and that's something that you do have to focus on against the Pumas. You do have to hold your width the whole time. But absolutely, if they can not allow the Pumas to get good front foot ball, and then the other key is, like, in terms of how the Pumas managed to rack up their points last week, they put their opponents under pressure, and then their opponents gave away penalties. And that's something, the discipline of the Wallaby side is going to have to be massive here. No flopping off the ball, no slowing it up, staying on side,
no crazy high tackles,
holding your width. Basics of the game without playing them into the game, and then the onus will be on the Pumas to try more and to really try and get on top.
And that's, like, to be honest, where Cheika had loads of success while he was the Wallaby coach against the Pumas, was in doing that, disrupting them and forcing them to go a little helter-skelter wide, and they picked off a lot of intercepts against a more panicked Puma side before. And they do have a good record against the Pumas, they really do. So they'll be looking to try and exert themselves on defence, and if they can manage to disrupt the Argentinian ball, you'll get to their halfback, maybe Kubeli, a bit more scrappy, a few looser passes, Sanchez not getting the service he was. That's the key to them getting on top and ultimately winning the game. In terms of predictions, do we have any? What are your thoughts here? This is obviously a colossal game. Oh, it's huge. I really want to say the Pumas. I would love to see them do it. I would really love to see them go all the way. I'm wondering, the main if about this game is just, what are we going to see any lull or any dip off as far as intention and intent from the Pumas, and just energy levels, because they were so up for last week. And likewise, are they going to be asked more questions? Are there going to be more questions asked of them by the Wallabies? Yeah, also a question. We've seen it a lot as Irish fans. We've seen super passionate performances where every man plays out of his skin, and it's very tough the week after. Sometimes you do see a lull in that, and they can lose games easily the week after, and I'm familiar with that picture, and I don't want it to be the case. But the Wallabies, it could very easily. It could easily be. The Wallabies have had a week off. They've seen the game. They have tape now on the. They have an opportunity to win the Tri Nations. They do have that too, and they're a very good team. That's also true. So my head is kind of leaning Wallabies, where my heart is leaning Pumas. So I don't know who to side with in this instance. Where are you leaning?
Give me an answer.
I'll say the Pumas by 3.
Pumas
by 2 with a Sanchez drop goal in the 83rd minute.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they're very good, the Pumas. Like, on the evidence of last week, if they can deliver a performance like that, there's no reason why they can't get on top of this Wallabies team. Because I do feel still like if the Wallabies were to play an England, say, next week, they'd struggle. Yeah. They'd struggle with the variety of the game that the English bring along with the physicality. Yeah. When you match the physicality that they were struggling with real dynamism and creativity, they do struggle. And the Pumas definitely have a bit of that.
Yeah.
Whether they can really open them up, I think, especially with them being in Australia and the opportunity that's aboard them, you would suspect that the Wallabies will score tries as opposed to the try singular that the All Blacks scored, because they're more creative. They have a better offense than the All Blacks, as hard as that might be for a Kiwi fan to hear.
Yeah, it's true at the moment.
Yeah. So again, I think it's going to be perhaps close, but we'll say a 6-point win for the Wallabies. But I genuinely think that a lot of this, as you say, is going to depend on what kind of Pumas rocks up, whether they bring the same energy. Yeah. And if they do, there's no reason why they can't go and win this game. It's very exciting for that reason.
But I would be deflated if I see a subdued and a slack Argentina and then the Wallabies run in a load of tries. It could easily happen that the Wallabies win by 20 because the Pumas aren't.
I really don't think so.
I hope not.
I really don't think so. It's possible, but I really don't think so. I think that the Pumas look a very, very good side, and when they put together a bit of momentum, like they have done in World Cups, and this is very much similar to that in terms of they're in one camp, there's no travel issues, and it's no very much like a World Cup campaign in that it's week on week and gets very important. And when they've done that in the past, they have been sensational right to the very last.
It's true.
So I think they will be good. Yeah. I think they'll be very good, and I wonder. I think it's going to be an excellent game. And in my prediction, where the Wallabies win, the Wallabies will get them on the wide channels and steal the game. But it's going to be tight. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be high standard.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely one of the games of the weekend, and so exciting. And just these two teams in with a shout of winning it. What's not to love? The Tri Nations really
is back, baby. What a competition!
Yeah, we love it. We love it. And so we move on to the Northern Hemisphere. A change of gears here as we're back with the Autumn Nations Cup 2020.
The Autumn Nations Cup, we were 1 weekend in the books. It was outshone by what we were just discussing, obviously, with the Pumas.
Yeah.
It was a pretty underwhelming start to the competition, I'd say. A lot of the fans aren't warming to it. I'm sort of noticing it's very much being treated. It is a competition, obviously, with less prestige.
Yes,
and
it's
brand new, and a lot of people are treating it as if it's like this 1 year thing, and then we're back to the Guinness series. The November series is rubbish, and some form of the Autumn Nations Cup needs to stay, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So I think if this is the inaugural and not the only Autumn Nations Cup, or
that's
at least
still
that's
what we're trying to will it to be.
Yes.
But obviously it's been suffering some setbacks. We only got 3 games out of the scheduled 4 played, with obviously France and Fiji missing out. Big bummer for Fiji, whose whole squad now has to isolate due to a COVID outbreak in the camp, and it was just a very, very disappointing thing. We had billed it as the game of the weekend. It kind of was.
It was 100%.
Considering what ended up happening with Ireland Wales,
the game of the weekend ended up being Italy Scotland.
It was, which is that's not really what you want from the tournament.
Definitely a real bummer with that, and that was definitely a deflating part of the weekend in terms of the games that happened. Ireland, opened the weekend against Wales with a very strong victory. I mean, our
32-9 was it?
Yes, 32-9. I mean, our concerns last week about the Welsh, springing a surprise and coming to town to really disrupt Ireland, were perhaps based more in fear than reality, because what transpired was just a non-entity of a performance from Wales, where they were determined seemingly to lose every single battle. Didn't matter, like if Ireland made a mistake or knocked the ball on in the red zone, Wales would just mess up a line out or give it right back to us. I mean, it was the lack of resistance in terms of what Ireland were facing was shocking. It was, Ireland played well, but I mean they were not tested for a minute in that game.
It's true. I don't quite know what I'm looking at with Wales. Certainly there was a few little plays even Alan Wynne-Jones was getting in the act with the silly penalties that they were giving away. But
Yeah.
Liam Williams...
They were bringing like shoves off the ball.
Yeah, well, I was going to cite Liam Williams had one, and I think Liam Williams is a prickly customer at the best of times, but he was on with James Lowe, and one of the early, I think it was only 2 minutes into the game, where there was a nice little set-piece move by Ireland, and Johnny Sexton took a gap, and then rather than pop it off to Henshaw, he tried to do a double skip to Lowe, which he then dropped, and it was a questionable pass selection, but a good early sign. And immediately after that, Liam Williams off the ball just pushed Lowe over, and Lowe got up with a big beaming smile on his face and pushed him back, which is like one side's playing positively, the other side's trying to play
Liam Williams
quickly.
did is like try to get him in a headlock.
He got sat down by Lowe then, and Lowe ended up being the one who grabbed the try. Like, I don't know what they're trying to bring. They're trying to bring a prickliness, but without any...
That seemed to be it, yeah. They were trying to bring some prickly edge without bringing anything more substantive. But yeah, certainly from that game, from an Ireland point of view, they were able to work some things out, but very much untested, and for Wales, very much still at sea. We'll talk about those games perhaps a little bit more in the context of previews we're going to do.
Yeah.
We also had the Scotland beating Italy, as we mentioned, 28-17 if memory serves.
That's correct.
Italy all over it at the beginning of the game, and it sort of, I mean, you mentioned it last week. It's something you've been on about them the whole time.
Weeping for this game. It was the game of the weekend, and yet after the first quarter, I was convinced Scotland were going to win.
Yeah, it was hilarious watching it together, because obviously they dominated that game at the start, and Scotland were nowhere, and they were playing some beautiful rugby, and there were huge shoots of positivity, particularly with the kicking game that is at last there from Garbisi and Canna in particular.
They were varying it like you asked them to.
They stopped kicking the ball in the sky, which is just great to see, and you can't run it out from everywhere, so you got to probe, and they did that so well, and their general play was so good, and as you said, like, they needed to make that period of dominance count.
God, like, Scotland were so awful in that first half. They were nowhere, and are you telling me that, like, when it was 6-0 and Scotland scored that try,
they chalked it off,
even though they chalked off the try, I was just like they scored, Italy scored their try of the game.
That's
that
what
was
got me excited. I was like, hey, they chalked that one off, they're still in this, and you were like, no, it's over.
It is over. It was over. I knew it. They kicked for 17 to take the lead, and 17 was all they scored. And what did I say? They need to score more than 20. They need to focus on scoring 20 themselves.
They need to get tries.
You're tries in the first quarter. Like, Scotland were so abject.
It should have been like 14-0.
Should have been 21-0. Yeah. Like, you telling me you couldn't put 21 on that Scotland team?
That has to be a focus. They got it. Yeah,
I didn't mind I don't mind the 3-pointers in the second half, and I even saw an interview with Stewie Hogg talking about that game, going like, we were obviously nowhere in the first half, but the second half felt like we were in control. And it's like, of course, you're better than Italy. We knew this, but you were really bad in the first half, and Italy should have recognised the time to take the lead properly and put them under pressure. As it was for Scotland, though, on the flip side, impressive considering how badly they played to win that game.
Saw it home, showed some good clutch. You know, they could have melted. Yeah. I didn't think Duncan Weir played particularly well, and I think that hurt them.
He missed that big tackle for the Italian try. That kind of was what broke the line, and then Italy took it well.
But they showed good composure. They showed the maturity of a team that's confident in what they're doing. And like in times gone by, they would have melted away in Rome. If they'd started like that, they would have ended up losing the game. But they're now at a stage where they're supremely confident that they're a better team than Italy. Yeah. And so it was enough to see that game home. Not especially impressive, but a bonus point win chalked off 5 wins on the bounce. Yeah. And that's going to be confidence enough going into this week to see them in a good place.
I would think so, yeah. And then the other game was England absolutely hosing Georgia, 40 points to 0. A curious enough affair, because certainly the first quarter, Georgia managed to repel them for the first 10 minutes, while England were like determined to scrum and go narrow against them.
They wanted to paint the Georgian picture, so they only went to the corner. They didn't kick any 3-pointers, and they wanted to set like slow. That's exactly what they did. Georgia. They set up like this slow, monotonous sequence in the Georgian 22 where they kept scrumming and slightly started edging it and got the better of it and then scored a try, which is what Georgia like to do to tier 2 teams. It's just hilarious, Eddie Jones being hilarious. I mean, there's a million ways he could have won this game, but he decided to beat Georgia at their own game for, I guess, the training run of it, or just maybe they just liked the idea of doing that.
What's good about it is it does focus the minds. Like, it's easy to come in a little sluggish. We saw Georgia take it to Wales a couple of years ago in the Millennium Stadium by kind of catching them with their pants down, whereas England, when you're dialed for that focus, and they do have a respect for the physicality of the Georgians, so it just meant that they were not off the pitch.
Yeah, and
they
determined to beat them there. It was
Yeah.
almost like, we know we can beat you by running around you, but we want to show that we can beat you by running through you.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and they did that. I mean, Georgia, like I did predict a 50-point loss, and it was only 40 points. I mean, the wet weather and England's approach really are what kept the scale.
What's concerning for Georgia was the lack of any scores, and the lack of
7
even
points
the
in the
hope
last 2 games.
for scores.
Yeah.
They didn't score at all, and they didn't really look
tough,
like
though.
it.
I mean, they're a tier 2 team. They're not just playing a tier 1 team. They're going to Twickenham to play England.
It's true.
Like, that's not an ask that's reasonable.
No,
really.
it's true.
Like we talked about how bad their preparation has been. Like, that's not a game they ever were going to be in for a moment.
No, it's true.
It's the worst matchup in rugby for Georgia, I would say.
It probably is.
Apart from
maybe
the All Blacks in Eden Park or the Springboks in Johannesburg. It's one of those. Like, they're just not a prayer.
Yeah.
And so in that regard, like, they showed some good physicality. As
they
we say,
won a
like,
few scrums.
Yeah, and from a defensive point of view, they weren't monstered in that way. Like,
No,
they slowly were beaten, but they weren't monstered. And they, like, as you say, they were they're shocked by the speed and the clinicality of opponents, but they're not shocked by the physicality.
No,
even of England, they were game for that. At least,
it's
know?
true.
So,
So that is positive, but the scores need to come. And I think the moment of the match that really broke the back of the Georgians was when they did, towards the end of the first half, they won a scrum penalty, and it was huge, and we were roaring.
Yeah.
And then the next thing was Tato missed touch, and it's like, if you're a Georgian prop looking at that, like, we were all ready to do our line out drive, and now there's an Englishman running at us again, and it was just, from then on, there was no
also
hope.
Nigel Owens was as bad to them as I suspected he'd be.
He's
He
always-
was pretty much yelling at them by the end of the game. Like, they're just trying to slow the ball up, Nigel. Would you ever leave them at it? And he was like, "No, go away, watch it." You like, he hates them. He really hates.
To be fair,
yeah.
I can see why. Like, Nigel's
all rugby.
Yeah, he
running rugby.
loves running rugby, loves
Yeah.
quick rugby, and
Romanticises it.
the Georgians are never going to be in his good books for that reason. But it was amusing.
Just one more thing before we move on, obviously, to the games in general. It was announced on Monday that France, for the discounted game against Fiji, were to be awarded a 28-0 win, a bonus point victory. And they did, however, explain their statement here, or their decision here in this statement, that they say, here's what the Autumn Nations Cup officials have to say. It says, following last week's cancellation of the France v Fiji match, the tournament organisers of the Autumn Nations Cup have confirmed a decision to award a 28-0 victory with a bonus point to France. And here's the kicker, here's this beautiful sentence. Whilst no fault has been apportioned to Fiji rugby, the competition rules provide that if a team is primarily responsible for a match not taking place, that the opposition will be awarded a 28-0 victory with a bonus point. Then they go on to say, we wish the affected Fiji players well. I mean, like, how can you say no fault and then in the same sentence say, but they are primarily responsible? I mean, it's not their fault, but primarily it is.
Yes.
You know, what are you talking about? I mean, I hate this. I
know.
really, really hate. Why are we blaming teams for getting COVID?
I know.
I mean, it's just stupid. The reason you can't reschedule the game is because of France's clubs being so uptight that they won't let anyone go. So award the 28-0 win to Fiji. Otherwise, reschedule the game. French clubs don't want it. Screw it. France lose.
Yeah.
They would not do this if it was France who had COVID.
No, they 100%
No
wouldn't.
way would they do that.
No.
They just want a France-England game to wrap up this tournament.
do.
That is bollocks. I'm sorry. I think that's
yeah.
ridiculous.
It is. It's wholly unsurprising. However, it is thoroughly unfair.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm not surprised. But I do agree with your broad point of, like, why are we punishing the COVID getting teams? Like, Sale were in the news this week about exactly that, going like, oh, by the way, no, we weren't having house parties in Manchester. Why on earth were you spreading baseless rumours in the press about it? All these other coaches, but it is just, there's a blame game going on, and teams are terrified to get COVID.
The only league that's done it right so far is the Pro 14, where there's been some cases in Benetton and I think a couple of other teams where they're just like, easy does it. We'll play the game in the new year during the Six Nations on an off week.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Get yourselves healthy.
Exactly.
Get yourselves right. We're not going to spread the virus. Like, that's the attitude that needs to be taken. This bizarre blame game is ridiculous. Nemanja Ndozola was tweeting today, like, I'm fine, by the way, if anyone cares.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's bizarre.
It is bizarre. And it is like 28-0 win awarded to France is a thoroughly unfair and baseless thing.
Yeah, and it just cements, it's another log in the ladder of, like, these some nations get the nice treatment and others don't, you know.
and Fiji have yet to be in the nice treatment category, it seems, and we do just on a broad thing wish all the Fiji players well, and hopefully they will recover in time. And I do hope that they don't cancel everything, which may happen this week. I think they should, even if they're completely in last place. A game between them and Georgia and the other thing
100%
would be worth doing.
100%. Like give them every chance to get themselves right. There's no need to cancel games this far in advance. Next week they're due to play Scotland, have them go through the round of COVID testing again. If it comes up too many positives, you can cancel that game. That's all fair enough. Can't be spreading the virus, etc. But don't cancel their game against Georgia until they absolutely have to, or whoever finishes bottom. I should say Wales, maybe. Who knows? But don't cancel their last game 2 weeks out just because you want to make a decision. We don't they could be healthy by then. So absolutely don't do that.
But with that, I suppose we'll pivot on to some of our previews, and we're just going to start by continuing on that same point, because we had Italy-Fiji, which was going to be the curtain raiser for the weekend. Obviously, that has now been cancelled for the same reasons we just outlined.
29 players in the squad tested positive on Monday.
A whole squad, so there's just no way. So we'd imagine the precedent now has been set that this will also result in a 28-0 victory to Italy and a bonus point for them.
Well, if it ends up 3 ways, then it's all chalked off and it's not that big a deal, but it's ridiculous.
It's not a good precedent, I don't think, and it's thoroughly unfair on Scotland if they are
having to play Fiji. Can you imagine, if it maybe in a crazy world, they get a draw against France, and then it's that bonus point against Fiji that gets France into the final game, which is mental. It's obviously this game is called off. I mean, Italy coming off that gutsy defeat to Scotland, they would have marked this game as really one to attack. I think it was like Fiji, obviously untested, huge amount of talent, but Italy might have fancied themselves to get them maybe up front and to get them with a bit of organisation and a bit of hustle. For
sure, and they'll have been buoyed by last week's showing, and it's a bit of a bummer. It'll be a bit of a momentum killer for them from the.
They are improving though, and they're going to play a changed French team next week, and they're showing a bit of better physicality, a bit of better kicking game. As you say, it's game management that they really struggle with, and that's definitely a work on for them.
Yeah, and not identifying key moments, which is pivotal for them. They're still a young team and they're still frequently outmatched, but this would have been a lovely fixture for them, for both teams. Then just for Fiji's point of view,
we're still very excited if we can get to see these guys play. The Bottias of the world and the Ranrajers.
A terrible November/October for Vern Cotter. He was meant to be coaching the Barbarians, and then it was COVIDed out, and now it's Fiji.
That wasn't COVIDed out either. That was
Sarri's lads having points. That's right. It's been a pretty dismal. I've been excited about Vern Cotter this whole window, and we haven't got to see any of his teams take the field yet. Which is a bummer.
They've just got to be headstrong. They will be back, on a macro scale. Actually, getting a bit of time off for these Fiji guys is no bad thing. A lot of them play a lot of rugby
in the top tours often. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so they'll obviously come back next season, but there's no question that this was a huge opportunity, and it's just another reason why this tournament, the Autumn Nations Cup, should come back in some variety with the likes of Fiji included again, because an opportunity to play some form of competitive rugby in November against Tier 1 sides is great. Is great and needs to continue, because it's a missed opportunity for Fiji now. And as the tournament becomes a de facto Six Nations, I think it's important that we remember that on paper this is a very good idea.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, this is undermining how good of an idea this tournament is with the COVID, but sure, it can't be helped. It is what it is.
Listen, I think we'll move on to positive, more positive, more interesting dynamics in that. We have a massive game. We have a colossal game, a game that perhaps rivals the Tri-Nations game that's going on on Saturday between Australia and Argentina. We have a game between two informed sides, England and Ireland,
in
Twickenham. For us this is massive, but for the tournament this is massive as well. This is Pool A was billed as sort of the pool of death it is, and this is likely to decide who tops it.
Yes, indeed.
This is mouthwatering. I mean, we have a Toji and Daragh up there, but England, arguably the best team in the world at the moment, and an Ireland team that's trying to come, that has arguably, for all of our gripes, been the most successful of the teams with new coaching tickets this year. Has failed to fall. Maybe France, obviously, with Galtier coming. But Galtier was kind of in charge of the World Cup.
He brought in the World Cup to kind of, and he improved things there, and they've just kind of kicked on. I think Ireland have done a creditable job, but this is a huge test, obviously. Just in terms of the game itself, it's going to be on Saturday, obviously 21st of November. 3 p.m. kickoff over here. And reffed by Pascal Gauzer. So Frenchman is the man in the middle. And just the weather forecast a few days out says it's set to be about 13 degrees, a little breezy, a little cloudy, relatively low chance of rain, which is
that is,
positive.
as you would say last week, quite November.
Quite November, as it is still November here. For
you might get away with it, in London. That's decent conditions for rugby. A bit of breeze, maybe a bit of rain, but nothing these guys aren't used to, and it's not going to be apocalyptic conditions by any stretch. Well, maybe a bit of a wet ball.
Yeah,
but outside of that, they should be all right.
To try and play a bit of rugby and stamp their authority. And just as far as the colour of the fixture is concerned, obviously Eddie Jones has a lot of. He's the hype man for rugby a lot of the time, and he's been billing it as his biggest of the year.
He's great. He's comes up with all the tricks. My fear for Eddie Jones is that eventually it's going to stop working for him when he has to come up with new and crazier ways to get his players dialed into a game.
Yeah.
But now this game is the biggest of the year.
Yeah.
He does like to talk big, but there's definitely a truth to it that like a win here would put them in pole position, you might say, to secure even more silverware this year and really stamp down their authority as Europe's best side. I think they have a mind playing France in the final.
They do. Well, they want to get that win.
They want to get that win.
They lost that, and it meant that there wasn't that authority. There wasn't a Grand Slam in the Six Nations, even though they were the better team in it, and they did manage to get the trophy at the end of it. Yeah, they'll still have a bone of contention to pick with France, and this is their chance to tee up that rematch of what they'll be thinking. But they can't overlook an Irish team. They certainly won't, I don't think.
They do have to avoid against complacency, and that's probably why Eddie Jones is focusing their minds on actually this is the biggest game of the year, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have such a powerful recent record against them, coming off a performance against Georgia last week, which was fun and so. But this is definitely a step up in an area like just want to be sharper in the handling and sharp in the physicality and doing what they do to Ireland. In terms of colour, from an Irish point of view, these games
scary.
These games are scary.
Scary fixture. England and Twickenham.
It's possibly flown under the radar to some extent. I think everyone has an idea of it, but actually these games against England sides, amongst sort of the Irish media and the Irish sort of broader rugby diaspora, I guess, has been something of like a talking point. They've always been, really since the 2018, they've always been a key sort of telling indicators. Really over the last 2 years there have been 5 consecutive defeats to English teams that have really, really hurt Irish rugby. I mean, it started in Dublin in 2019. It was like a humiliating home pasting that very quickly and very brutally crushed all of those notions that had been swelling of being the world's best side since that world.
Fresh from beating the All Blacks and thinking we were number one in the world.
They were winning all of the awards.
Sexton Player of the Year.
Sexton Player of the Year, Team of the Year, Coach of the Year. You're all of this 2018, a year out from the World Cup in perfect position. Even Brian O'Driscoll, I think, was going on media, British media, and saying, actually, I don't think there's a single English player I'd pick in the Ireland team.
Yeah, all that
and then,
crazy chat.
Yeah, and then February 2019 comes and they destroy us it takes Ireland a long time. They never really recover from it.
Yeah,
they go through the motions in the rest of the Six Nations. I think they pick up a bad loss to Wales at the end of it after scrambling through the midsection.
They do
after that defeat to England, but they never really got that mojo back. Then the second crushing defeat to England came in club colours, actually. It was in the Heineken Cup Champions Cup final, where you had Leinster and Saracens playing each other in Newcastle. Both sides really backboned by the same personnel you see in the green and white jerseys.
It's true, yeah.
Leinster, in many ways, sort of the pride and the shining light of Irish rugby in recent times as a club side.
Certainly.
Fell victim at this occasion to the English side's raw brutality and physicality in what was a commanding second half performance where they took control and really did cement a level of dominance of like, we're getting the edge on these guys.
Yeah, it's true.
The third and most brutal one then came in the World Cup warm-ups right after Ireland came out of a World Cup camp in Portugal where they were presumably putting their plans in place. Any confidence that they might have gathered, any momentum that might have been got from that, was instantly chalked off by a really, really brutal 57-15 defeat to England.
Yeah, they were nowhere in that
Twickenham.
game. Yeah.
That was Ross Byrne's last start for Ireland, and he is scheduled to start this week, and that's obviously another factor.
It's true.
Earlier this year, 4th defeat in a row, you would say, to English teams in a big game.
Yeah.
Six Nations this year. Deja vu, kicked in behind us, owned it physically, sharper, more to the pitch. all over us.
Yeah.
Another crushing defeat. Every one of these defeats crushing, dominant, not close.
Yes.
And finally they wrapped it up since the restart with a Heineken Cup Champions Cup quarter-final match between Saracens and Leinster, again a rematch from last year. Leinster had gone unbeaten after that Saracens defeat the year previously, only to be beaten by them again this year.
Yeah.
Owned at the scrum, owned in the contact, beaten up, over at half time. Leinster came back into it, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Another commanding victory for an English side, edging the physical battle over Ireland.
Yes.
And so that 5 defeats in how many months is that, since February last year?
Not many.
Not many. Yeah, not many. Yeah. So that is 5 consecutive bad defeats.
Yeah.
Dominant defeats to English teams, bullying them physically and outsmarting them and outworking them and just looking utterly superior to them.
Yes.
That has taken its toll.
Well, it's one of the big things that needs to be remedied from an Irish point of view. They need to get something off against this English team for them to believe that they can anymore.
Yeah.
Like it really did burst the balloon of Irish optimism, and it really hasn't quite returned since. It's definitely a pivotal one. Despite being over in Twickenham, they will want to put it together a cohesive performance. It starts with not getting blown away in the first quarter, which is actually more so than the Leinster games in that list. It's been the first quarter for Ireland against England the last few years. It's just been
the Saracens
all
game in the quarter-final, to be fair.
Quarter-final, actually, that's right. Yeah, no, I'm thinking the one instance was the final a couple of years ago, the Leinster final, where the Leinster actually took a lead 10-3 and then coughed it up before half-time, and the second half was all the Saracens. But if we can not get blown away in the first quarter, please, and let's have a contest here, that would improve things immediately, and then you can be in the game and try and mix it up.
Yeah, I mean there are some encouraging signs coming off that Wales game. The bright new sort of Kiwi additions of Gibson Park and James Lowe have added some much needed spark and some tempo.
The offense was so stale before them, and it definitely has increased in tempo and a little bit more bite in it. Yeah, for sure.
So Ireland know they need to bring something new to this game, and the question is this just going to be another painful addition to the long list we've listed off, or is there some kind of riposte? Is there some clever play that they can bring to this game? We are going to tuck into it in terms of previewing both sides. We'll start just with the squads. We actually have the Irish team, which is great, and we have the English squad, which has been named down to about, I think, 20 odd players. We know we don't know who's going to be starting and who's on the bench, but we can pretty much guess. And we have a good idea. Like the 2 loose heads are Mako Vunipola and Ellis Genge. 2 hookers, Jamie George and Tom Dunn, Sinclair and Stewart in a tight head. I would suspect the locks will be Hill and Itoje with Launchbury on the bench, and the back row will be Curry, Underhill and Billy V, probably with Ben Earl on the bench. Where it gets interesting is the back line. They'll have Ben Youngs with Dan Robson to come on, but whether they go with Farrell and Slade and maybe Ollie Lawrence with a bit of heft, or Jonathan Joseph with a bit of speed in 13, or whether they go back to George Ford, Farrell and Slade. That's an interesting dynamic. And then in the back 3 there's interesting questions. Max Malins or Ollie Thorley could be given a shout.
Very, very green as far as they have a cap each, I think. Malins and
Thorley excites the hell out of me. I think getting him on the pitch would be no bad thing at all.
For sure.
As far as the Ireland squad is concerned, this one has been named in its entirety, mercifully enough. They've made some changes, but more or less the same heads. Cian Healy, Kelleher gets the nod at hooker.
Yes.
Porter maintains it, coming on from close to a man of the match performance last week. Quinn Rue and James Ryan in that lock. Quinn Rue wears 4 despite being the tight head lock, because Ryan is captain and captains are 5s
apparently.
And Stander gets in at blindside flank, switched with Daragh, who's at number 8, which is nice to see.
Good to see finally.
O'Mahony gets the 7 shirt, which is an interesting
call.
Given Will Connors is a bit of a energizer bunny coming on off the bench. Like he can run for 80 minutes, but he's on the bench and he will come on. O'Mahony's form is great. Gibson Park at 9 keeps his jersey. Great. Excellent news. Had a really great game against Wales last weekend. Ross Byrne gets the nod at 10 over Billy Burns.
I'm encouraged. He's definitely better than Billy Burns, but as you said, his last game in a green jersey was in Twickenham in a shellacking.
Maybe there's a part of his head that's wishing he could have got the game against Italy instead of only being given a chance at Twickenham. Aki and Farrell in the centre in the absence of Henshaw and Ringrose. Fine centres, very defensive, very physical, not the best passers, just like all the other Irish centres. James Lowe maintains his position on the wing, and Keith Earls gets the other wing position, while Keenan is in position, correctly selected at fullback, which is
very encouraging. Daragh at 8 and Keenan at fullback. Something that should have been done from the very beginning. It's good to see it here in time for the Twickenham.
That one rectified. On the bench is Rob Herring, Ed Byrne, Finlay Beelum, Ian Henderson, Will Connors, Conor Murray, Billy Burns and Jacob Stockdale.
Some good impact there for sure.
100%.
Yeah, I suppose we will pivot on then from the just in terms of a few other notes on the squads. Just the point about Ireland, it's the most project players ever fielded by the Irish team. It's
5 of the 15 are project players.
That's interesting.
There isn't a comment really to be made on that, apart from they've notably made it a decision of theirs, and it has been decided that the rule was a bit silly and since stopped.
Yes.
But it is what it is. Every team is, from Japan to Wales to the All Blacks, have all done it, and there's definitely a touch of residency rule being exploited to it, but
it is what it is.
As long as the guys are committed to the team and committed to the game and want to bleed and represent the country with as much passion and as much gusto as they can, there really can't be any complaints.
No, exactly. I don't mind picking on form when form dictates it, and like Aki is well worth his place. Low,
Bundy
definitely.
Aki, I talk about an attitude, that guy, just what an attitude he has.
Yeah, and CJ Stander as well. No one could fault his commitment to the cause over the years. So it's just an interesting little note that 5 of the starting 15. But I think that's all we have on squads. We will pivot into just the winning conditions for both of the sides and what they'll be looking to get out of the game and how they will be looking to implement their game plan. And we'll start with the hosts, which is England at Twickenham, obviously, and how they're going to look to attack Ireland. And we kind of know, we're kind of experts on how England attack Ireland over the last few years. But
Eddie Jones always seems to make a point of being sort of the he wants to be the innovator, he wants to be proactive and not reactive, and he wants to sort of second guess how Ireland are going to approach what he has been doing and coming up with something new. But one wonders whether the formula that's worked for so many occasions in a row might not be
just the wisest call to go.
I mean, they start the game like a house on fire. They keep the pace of it really quick. They own the contact area with sort of dynamic and physical carries that are subtle as well, in terms of you don't know who's getting the ball. They're all coming onto it at pace. They're linking up with each other, getting over the gain line, and then Ben Youngs is just a mover on, or gets there, moves it on, and all of a sudden it's into the hand of the playmakers, and they can get reads on the Irish defence. If the Irish come flying up, they can probe in behind with little kicks that have tortured the Irish back through.
They have really. Even last week we saw Wales manage to, the few plays they did probe was with little attacking kicks, and England are better at that than Wales. So that with all the kickers they have in the back line, I expect them to try and move around.
Well, not to mention not just the Wales game. I mean, the game prior in France, which you could argue was the last time Ireland were given a game. I think 2 tries, like the Stockdale apocalyptic play with just a little grubber in behind, and then Stockdale spills hit the French kick on, and Daragh ends up actually giving away a penalty try, a yellow card by playing a guy off the ball. You can cause catastrophe on the evidence of how Ireland have been dealing with these balls by putting probing kicks in behind.
It's true.
And even Roman Ntamack, the Irish defence shot up. They had Murray on the field, who was lined up as a winger, and nobody in the backfield. Ntamack, little sharp chip off the left peg, gather, pop inside, try. There are tries to be scored by doing that against Ireland for sure.
And England are the best at it in the world with all their multitude of options. So I'd expect that to be a big part of how they approach it, as well as just pace. Moving the Irish about is a surefire way to keep them on their heels, and not defending proactively but reacting to what England are doing, which is all about. England are all about that. They like, as you say, to be proactive and to be the ones dictating the tempo of the game. And they've had a great success doing that recently. I think one of the key areas, though, that they are missing, or that is different and changed from those games, is the absence of a Manu Tuilagi. A big notable absence of Manu Tuilagi, because his record is a perfect one against Ireland. He's, I think, 6 from 6 any time he's lined up against Ireland. And without him there in that midfield, it's probably the Irish midfield that'll have the more heft between Aki, Farrell, and
it's something that you've seen from England all the time, is the strike plays, particularly off line out, where they go off the top, and the first thing they do is get a Tuilagi right into the midfield, right into the heart of the 2 Irish guys, who try as they might. Often it was Henshaw and Ringrose, but even Aki's and Farrell's couldn't really stop him. He's over the gain line, he's getting yard.
And by the time the centres are sat down.
Yes, the centres are sat down, and then by the time the ball gets to the deck and gets to the back, Ben Youngs is already there, Farrell and co are already around the corner, and they're ready to just open up Ireland on the second and third phase. Usually, actually, what they did is a Tuilagi carry, Billy Vunipola or someone gets around the corner, him carry, Irish defence completely at sea, then the ball goes wide, so it's that third phase strike. And even if Ireland are desperately working away around the corner, they can flick that back to short side. They have all these kind of little tricks where they're looking at like these 3-phase plays. We sit them down, we get around the corner and sit them down again. But as you say, without the Tuilagi in there, they could have an Ollie Lawrence come in and try and sort of run that model with Lawrence running hard lines. He definitely commits to contacts and runs really hard. That is one way they could go about it. What they could also do is just narrow things up a little. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing the 3-phase strike play where you're actually going off a shorter line out and getting Billy Vunipola running right down the 10 channel.
Yeah, a different way to go.
We don't know what Ireland are going to do, but generally the defensive line is Sexton at the 10 channel running out of the line. He's usually supported by a back rower, but he comes in and makes hits. If Ross Byrne is going to be lined up similarly, getting Billy Vunipola into his face-off first phase is likely to yield results. Get the ball to the base, round the corner, another big carry over the gain line, then it gets to phase 3, Ireland's defence is fractured, and that's where the back line strike. That is the model. Offset piece, they are ruthlessly efficient off lineouts in particular. And that is something that they're going to really focus on, I think, to open up the Irish defence and break that confidence.
It'll be just interesting to see how they shift that, because whatever combinations they go with across the 3-quarter line in the midfield might give them a chance to go, as you say, a little narrower or perhaps a little wider sooner. They'll want to probe and test the 13 channel of Farrell and maybe get outside them.
But I think that comes on third phase.
Probably,
I think they back their physicality. I think it's phase 1 smash, phase 2 smash. Now Farrell's gets his hands on the ball and we move. And that model has worked for them.
The other thing they'll need to be mindful of is if Ireland are bullish and up to this, they do have jacklers everywhere and turnover artists, so you don't want to that smash.
Whole back row. That whole back row, Daragh, Stander and O'Mahony have had superb games where they've dominated the breakdown area from a defensive point of view. So they can't get lost. Like when I'm talking about Billy Vunipola smashing, he does it with a man next to him, usually a Curry or an Underhill right next to him, or a Johnny Hill. Those guys, it's on them to work hard and
resource the offense.
Yeah, exactly. This is how they make it quick for Ben Youngs. You know, one guy goes in, owns his contact, Latcher comes in, drives him, he goes to deck, Rook's already over. And then Ben Youngs has the ball.
Gone.
They have to be really focused to that, because as you say, Ireland could show up and be much more physical and have a Pumas-esque performance where they're coming out and making big tackles and making things awkward for England,
chest pumping and all of
that's
that
where
stuff.
the Latchers need to really come in and help England and make sure that the breakdown ball is clean, because there are other things to do once that offense gets stopped. Like that's your set pace strike play, but on multi-phase as well, you can work Ireland, you can work the short side, you have multiple distributors. All you have to do is really get that defensive line up, to put a little probe and kick him behind, maybe commit a winger up and kick it over his head. They have such versatility in their backline and such beautiful shape to it as well, that they're never really out of it. They're one of the teams you'd trust most on multi-phase if they'd only trust themselves sometimes.
Sometimes they kick it off, kick it away prematurely. It'll be something Ireland will be looking to force, but generally they know the formula to beating Ireland. Sure, as we've said at the highlight of the preview, they've done it routinely for the last couple of years. But then when it comes to defending without the ball, England, it's a slightly different test than what they had. Like Ireland are playing a different kind of game, so they'll have to be alert to that. But things will probably have to change a little bit in terms of the width and speed that Ireland are bringing, and also just the new personnel in the centres for England. Like it's a slightly different job when you don't have a Tuilagi there to do a lot of the hefty work.
And it's a slightly different job as well when Ireland are trying to bring a bit more tempo and a bit more subtlety, which they have been doing. They're still playing off 9 a lot, and obviously when Sexton went off, they were playing off 9 nearly exclusively. But there was more. There was cleverness within the limitations of Ireland's play, as has often been the case over the last few years. It was nice to see them being a bit more clever
and a bit quicker.
So from England's point of view, like there was a couple of moments when James Ryan was shaping to get a ball and the ball didn't go to James Ryan, and there was a couple of clever things like that. They have arranged forward pods with a bit more width and a bit more spacing, and they have clever systems in place to make sure that the ball carrier is disguised. That said, the Gibson Park scrum half loop play that yielded a line break against Wales, England will be chewing at the bit if Ireland try that shit. Like the Gibson Park gives the ball to a forward who pretends to carry and pops it back to Gibson Park, and Gibson Park runs around and throws a screen pass to the out half who's in space. like England will come pouring through on that. If they see that shape at all, someone's going to come flying out and get Gibson Park as he gets the ball back. So that's something that England will, I think, target. If Ireland are trying some of those goofy plays that it's been one of the most painful pictures for us as Ireland fans watching them against England. They lose the physical battle and then they still try to run these goofy loop plays where there's no tempo to the game, and England just see it coming, and often it would be Sexton getting the ball around the corner with nothing to look at, and just a big white jersey in his face smashing him. And that's definitely, if Ireland are trying to play those sluggish kind of shapes, they should exploit that and they should get on top of it. But the key, obviously, the initial key is going to be to try and squeeze the life out of the Irish ball carriers. The Caelan Daragh carries that were so successful against Wales, stopping them, driving them back,
and then have your Underhills or whoever into the breakdown to make it scrappy and slow and disrupt at what Ireland are trying to establish as their rhythm, because there is only a brittle confidence to what Ireland are doing ball in hand, and if they can stop that, then they probably will revert to type as we've seen before, and England will be able to
slow down, kick the ball in the sky, and then England are laughing.
Exactly. As soon as Ireland are doing that, England have already won the game as far as I'm concerned. So it's pretty. There are a few key areas as well. Ireland have definitely struggled when they're in the red zone as well. They've got even more so. They've tightened up when they get within 5 meters of the line.
Well, the Wales got a couple of big turnovers as well. It was almost comical. They were playing good rugby in the middle third, and then when they got to the 22, they were trying to do Exeter stuff, and they weren't particularly good at it. They scored a nice try with Quinn Roux where they were bringing a bit of tempo and they had a bit of subtlety to it, and they managed to get a rhythm going.
Rollins completely softed out of that tackle with Quinn Roux, where I suspect Hill or Itoje would not.
Indeed, but even more is the point. There were a couple of occasions where it completely slowed down, and even Wales managed to get their hands in and get the turnovers because Ireland had got white line fever with it and couldn't move the ball. From an England point of view, harrying them and making these balls as awkward as possible and committing, bringing, if they ever try and go wide, bringing a full-on blitz in their face. These are the kind of things that Ireland, lacking in confidence, especially in that red zone, they are liable to drop the ball. They are liable to get cold around that breakdown area, attacking the pill, and
just
making
get shy about moving it as well. They still, their comfort zone is still picking jams, despite it being like the worst thing you can do against England. So if England can force them into doing it, that's a good key to their success on D. And just a few other things to be mindful of. Obviously, James Lowe, we had cited, is a live wire. Was busy last week, came off his wing. You'd expect if he is coming in field to do it, the English will be lining him up for a big smash. If he's working off his wing in those tight areas, he won't get the same purchases he did against Wales. Certainly that little carry, like a try that he scored was great. It was lovely to see the pick and jam from Caelan Daragh, the little soft hands to him. But like that channel there, that shouldn't be as soft as it was, and I don't think it will be for England.
It's definitely an area of interest for them. I think actually the two centres, Farrell and Aki, are big strong boys for Ireland. It's going to be interesting to see how England contain them if Ireland are trying to get them on the ball. They sometimes function as auxiliary flankers, which is something England find easy enough to deal with. If Ireland are trying to get them a little wider and moving them 2 passes, they're actually quite good offloaders of a ball. So if they can get on top of you, if England are on their heels a little bit, Farrell or Aki can win a contact, get the hands free, and pass it either to one or the other of them if each are picking a line off each other.
To James Lowe,
etc. So that's definitely an area of interest. I think when Ireland are trying to go wide, England should bring, once the ball gets out of Ross Byrne's hands, I think you're in full on sort of blitz mode. Because
the passing of the centres is so suspect that you want to pressure.
You're not, even if you leave a little bit of space in behind or leave a fractured line, I genuinely don't think the distribution skills are there for Maki or Farrell to open that up. So I think you're just getting in their faces. Then obviously you have to check yourself a little bit while Byrne has the ball, because he will put in the crossfield kicks. He'll put in kicks in behind. He's a very good kicker of a football. But once the ball goes from his hands, you're bringing a pressure defence, shutting down Tuilagi and Farrell and forcing them, if they want to go wide, to throw a pass. What did I say?
Tuilagi.
Oh, sorry.
It would be nice if Tuilagi was in the Irish midfield, but he's never has been.
Putting pressure on Aki and Farrell and forcing them to throw maybe a pass they haven't got in them is definitely the key there.
Big chance for success. And the final thing is as you say, Ross Byrne will be there to try and kick the ball. So between Ben Youngs and the back three, just be alive to that threat. Keep the pendulum going, cover the backfield space, and try
something
and
that Ireland have brought in the last couple of games.
A bit more of an attacking kick.
It was obviously with Sexton in there putting the
probe
in
that little
loving
grubber kick. I was encouraged to see it. So just being mindful that they are trying to work it in and just getting your spacing right on D for sure. But then when we get to the set piece, that's where things kind of get really interesting. This is probably where the game will be decided, is in the set
huge.
piece.
I mean, you go back to last week, Ireland, like, there's no reason why they wouldn't be confident after monstering the Welsh scrum. Completely and utterly. Great engine room drive from Quinn Roux, really seems to have turned Porter's scrummaging around. Porter does have some demons from the last time he faced Saracens. I think it might have been Richard Barrington who hung him out to dry, though. I don't think it was Mako. I could be wrong about that, though. But he was destroyed against Saracens in the scrum, which was the last real painful scrummaging outing he had. But he is in a great place.
And Quinn Roux does add a lot of heft in that. It's probably
I think it was probably Devon Toner behind him in that Saracens game, which is obviously worse.
It is much worse. I think it's the best part of Quinn Roux's game. I think it's why Joe Schmidt put trust in him, is that, like, he's a little loose all over the park a lot of the time, but he is strong in the scrum. And their whole selection, to go back to the squads briefly, is just seemed to be focused on set piece. Certainly Ireland's one, between the selection of Quinn Roux in the row to shore up the scrum, and the selection of Peter O'Mahony with CJ Stander there. O'Mahony in particular, just for line-out disruption. Because he is world-class at jumping at two and turning the ball over.
Last week against Wales, they picked off, I don't know how many
between himself and James Ryan, they were making a nuisance
even
of themselves.
Quinn Roux got a steal. It was colossal. And likewise, England will be coming with all the confidence in the world, in that they basically had a set piece drill last week where they were attacking the Georgian scrum, getting the better of it, really did
scrumming aggressively for penalties.
Ended up owning that scrum battle against a very good Georgian pack, and then at the line out caused absolute havoc on Georgian
Maro Itoji's second half line out disruptions are he does it to all teams, not just tier 2 ones, but he's a monster. Like,
it was brutal watching him doing that to Georgia. Like, I felt so bad for Georgia because he was so pumped up.
It
was why are you so pumped? Could you not just be like dialed out and leave the Georgians meander to a defeat?
Look, they're telegraphing. They're jumping at 2 now. Oh, there they go. No, Maro. Okay.
It was absolutely brutal to watch from a Georgian perspective. And then they also scored a hat-trick of maul tries. They were really on top in that area.
So their set piece is looking very well drilled and very sharp. But so is Ireland's, and Ireland look to have focused on it. So I think this will be a pivotal battle. Both teams like to strike off set piece. You saw
England in particular love to strike off lineouts, and I think Ireland do need to be brave here and really try to attack that lineout. I think they need O'Mahony and James Ryan to be up, making reads, trying. It is one of their winning pictures, is causing the English line out havoc.
You saw it with the Springboks in the final. They're like, if you can cause that upset, obviously scrum time was all Springboks, but the line out was disrupted and flowing. It was so pivotal. The English kind of don't really know what to do when that rhythm is upset. So that seems to be the focal point for Ireland, is to disrupt the line out and to match them in the scrum, and then make the game about other things as well. That's kind of what it is. And then the restart is the other set piece that really, from an Ireland's point of view, just get it right. They got the restart right, but in terms of defending or exiting off English restarts, there needs to be some improvement from Ireland, because like, this is the one team, the main team, that have really shown up the box kicking. It's the exclusive box kicking exit for the folly that it is, and they have punished us routinely. And
they forced teams to kick under pressure so well. The only time they mixed it up was in the World Cup final, actually, when they kept kicking to Willie LaRue down the middle, which was silly. It didn't work at all. The Springboks exited easily. I suspect the Springboks would have had some tricks up their sleeve to exit anyway, them being themselves. But definitely they're dealing with that English kick-off is massive, and they like to pin teams deep in the corner and force them to kick under pressure. Then they get the ball back at the line out. All of that obviously changes if Ireland can maybe work James Lowe's left boot in, get a little more depth, maybe disrupt things at the line out.
Throw a couple of passes in the 22 to get yourself into a better kicking position.
Certainly
where you're kicking on your
there have
turn.
been some occasions over the last couple of years when Ireland have been so slow and so predictable that, and in fact we saw it against France. You don't have to go over to the last 2 years. You saw it 2 weeks ago, where you had to zoom in on the scrum half and you could see in the background Gail Fico and the like just drop back, they're box kicking.
We're box kicking, everyone. And here comes the box kick, guys. We'll give you a 5 count. 5, 4, 3, 2 in the sky. We lost it.
Indeed. But like, one of the things that Leinster had worked in actually was setting up that slow box kicking and passing it and trying to go wide.
Well, it was on for Ireland a few times, because there were even centres dropping back, and you're like, space, and it's like, no, we're still going to kick it in the sky. So hopefully not, because again, England are the ones who have doled out the harshest lessons for doing that, the harshest punishments. So really, the restart from an Irish point of view is a key. And
it'd be nice to see them try and impose that picture on England themselves, trying to launch that ball deep. Ross Byrne, accurate kicking and a good kick chase and pin them back, and try and set up our own offence as well is definitely vital. To pivot on to Ireland themselves and in terms of their winning conditions, as you say, and how they're going to go about this game. First of all, just with the ball in hand, they never looked as pitiful and as poor as they have against England, obviously, as we've touched on in recent times. The ferocity that they bring in the contact has been pretty much the antidote to the Ireland slow play off nine, trying to resource the ruck, trying to generate some momentum and make a team make a lot of tackles. They have been bashed into submission. They've had their backline taken out of the game, and their slow play has been shown up, and then they've ended up kicking the ball in the air to no avail against an English team that's very ready for it.
So hopefully that does not continue. The positives from Ireland's point of view is that they seem to have shifted that point of focus. You have Gibson Park, who is a passing scrum half, not a kicking scrum half, which is a fundamental change in terms of how you want to go about attacking. So that is a positive change. Also, Ross Byrne, despite the last time he was in a green jersey, obviously a poor performance in Twickenham, but I will say that it's been true for Leinster. I've often said it, I really don't like when we go Luke McGrath, Ross Byrne, because I think both of them have narrow instincts where they sit too deep, but I think the only times I've seen Ross Byrne be really excellent is when Gibson Park is there throwing passes out in front of him. It's definitely
a nice crutch to have him with a scrum half he knows who can get the best out of him.
For sure.
That's definitely massive. We talked about how Ireland have more mobile forwards. They've had to in some areas, as we've spoken about, pick heft and set piece prowess over mobility in some areas, which is a shame. Like Ian Henderson would be a great guy to have out there. He is on the bench. Likewise, Will Connors.
But they good impact from both of them.
Yes, but good impact from both for sure. But we do have some very, very mobile forwards, and O'Mahony has renewed his form. He's got an offload game going. He's keeping up with the pace of the game better than most.
Seems to enjoy the new pod system. I think. I think he likes operating in some of those wider channels. The diving offload.
He might have been one of the guys who was more okay when Scott Penny was in Munster than your average
Munster man.
Forward.
Yeah, he didn't mind hanging out on the wing and linking with backs.
He has his moments. He's a very skilled individual, and likewise, Caelan Daragh, supremely mobile, man of the match last week, wins contact but gets wide, gets his hands free.
Even Kelleher
is the other one. Kelleher is the other one I'd look at as a guy who's been selected a lot for his over herring for his mobility. And this is what Ireland have to bring. They have to be quick. Their forwards have to be quick, because without Sexton and without centres who can pass really, they're going to be still a lot off Gibson Park, and it's still a lot of variety off Gibson Park. But what they've got to bring then is speed and linking up with one another.
Big job for obviously Keenan as well, in terms of you have a young 10 there, a guy who's a bit inexperienced, and when we saw that with Billy Burns coming on last week, Keenan from fullback was slotting into first receiver a few times to create that link from Gibson Park. Like the conduit is still at 9 obviously, but even when Conor Murray had to go out in a 10, it was nice to see a few distributors in there operating outside of Gibson Park.
Keenan in there is definitely value. He's got good footwork, he's got a nice passing game, he's a decent read on the game.
He's a proper fullback.
As a fullback coming in, he does need to. We were going to need to lean on him, especially with a young guy like Ross Byrne at 10. It's definitely something.
The load.
Sharing the load is very important. And listen, they getting the centres we deride for not being great passers of a game. What they can be, both of them, is great runners of a ball and good offloaders of a ball.
It could be the first time in a few years that we have the more physical midfield than the English, and I would be surprised if we don't try and exploit that.
Those exactly. Two running it can happen off Ross Byrne. It can happen off Gibson Park. They can be sort of in that auxiliary flanker role where it can get frustrating. But the key, I think, is breakdown speed and tempo, like getting James Ryan that little bit wider in his carries, having him link up with Daragh, maybe with an offload, then getting over the gain line, making it quick, and then getting the ball into the hands of the likes of Chris Farrell, having the English defence sat down. And that's where Chris Farrell actually looks quite nifty. If he can get in the contact and gets his hands free, he actually looks like he has a bit of skill to him, and he can get an offload away. Bundyaki picks as good a line as any centre in Europe.
It's true.
And he can slice through a defence. And then you can almost see the picture there for Ireland to get creative. It's just quickness off 9, subtlety in terms of who's getting the ball, so the English defence is sat down, linking up with each other, crucially, like when you're getting on top of a contact, have someone picking a tracking run off them, get an offload going, break up that English defence. Don't be slow and reactive.
Yes.
That for me is the key. Like Ireland have been so slow.
Yeah.
They have to be quicker. They have to run around.
They have to
this
be the
English
quicker
pack.
team than England. They're the smaller team on balance than England.
Especially up front. But
they
have some quick play. Like they have some players who played under Leinster, high tempo footy, and they have to embrace that. They really do.
They do, and if they are starting to get that flow, then you'll start to see the likes of Keithers, the likes of James Lowe picking those lines off the likes of a Farrell Lackey and an offload, and just that kind of deception, that kind of width will serve them very well in terms of just removing the English dominance of the collision zone from as being as big a factor as it has been. If you can make it a bit more deceptive, all the while keeping the ball protected, like you do need to, if you are going to make a half break rather than a full line break, you need to be there to resource the breakdown, because England do have monsters on turnover as well. But the focus,
ball placement is huge as well, and just clearing the ruck and going quick. The ruck time has to be flipped like a 180 from what we have been doing in terms of slow rucks and slow build up and off nine. Like England just love that shit. It has to be quick. It has to be all about tempo, and then running through the midfield. It's not even necessarily about width, but punching holes in the middle of the pitch, and then if those holes are effectively punched and you have a bit of room either on the short side or the open side to go wide, executing is crucial. But I suspect if England do narrow up, Ireland will go to the crossfield kick rather than the passing game, because honestly I don't think they have the hands to use an overlap if they have to take the full width of the pitch to do it, because by the time
whereas Ross Byrne's crossfield kick game is actually one of the better parts of his whole game.
It's the best way. It's Ireland's best method for getting wide in one phase. They won't do it without his boot, I would say.
It's probably true. It's unfortunate, but it's probably true. But just coupled with the crossfield kick, just a more varied attacking kicking game, using the likes of James Lowe's like rangy left boot on exit.
I think on exit he has to be the guy that they look at.
Like especially if England are going to pen it to the right hand side, where a right-footed box kicker is going to have the angle narrowed for him. Be courageous enough to go pass
or even just bring Low in at 10.
I wouldn't mind fine. I wouldn't mind pass because you want to kind of rake across the thing. Like
the danger with pass is shit pass.
But don't do bad
pass.
Like
try.
Do pass perfectly executed and then an exit. Like proactive exit. You need to be courageous.
I know, but
you need to mix it up.
I think getting like the, because if I'm England and I see Ireland going wide on their own try line, I go flying up into the face of the likes of Bundy Aki. And then he's like, oh no, there is space, but his pass might be off, or he might hold on to the ball, God forbid, and get snagged. And then you can heap pressure on yourself by doing that. If they're under a bit of pressure and they want to relieve it, just getting James Lowe to sit deep in the pocket and boot the ball
potentially
is a better option than a box kick from Gibson Park, who doesn't box kick and shouldn't be asked to.
Yes, it's true. So just varying that up is definitely key for Ireland as well. And anything else to say on our offense? Score some tries, boys.
Let's hope that we can score some tries. The red zone. I mean, we talked about the red zone offense in the context of England, but from an Ireland point of view, it's really sad to look at. Like when they get.
Why do we do an extra impression when we get 5 meters out?
It won't work against England, and even against Wales. For the dominance that we had in the game, we scored one try in the last phase, and prior to that, one try with the bludgeoning red zone pick and jam attempt. I think 2 or 3 or 4 occasions we butchered them. We were in the 22 and we just couldn't convert the score. Really, really shoddy stuff, and I just think being creative, bringing the same variety of shape, trusting Gibson Park to throw wide passes and then clearing and getting quick ball and moving it again, orchestrating a one-on-one with James Lowe and his opposite number. Like, these are the kind of things you need to do when you're in the red zone, as well as just deeper in the pitch. And Ireland, the fear in them when they get into the opposition 22, and the fact that they still think it's the best thing to try and spend 10 minutes scoring a try when they're down there is without question the worst thing about this team. It's awful to look at. It doesn't work. It's killing them, and it has to. That's an area that has to improve.
Throw passes.
I wouldn't even hate to see, if England are flying up and stymieing them, I wouldn't even hate to see them. I know we hate it when we see the likes of Australia do it. A little kick in behind, like it just being braver when they're in the opposition 22 would be something that would be refreshing, because at the moment they're just petrified to move the ball,
which is a problem, a thorough problem that needs. It would be nice to see them remedy that against England, where they have to
score tries. They've got to score tries. Like their try scoring is not great.
No, it's not. It's improved, but it's still not great. That's red zone conversion rate, obviously a huge factor as well. And then just on D, which is where really the games have been lost before any of that offensive stuff has come thus far. The defence, as you say, the quality of the tackle is the first, second and third port of call against this English guys. Can we please make proactive, dominant tackles and meet them and match them on the collision zone and on the gain line.
Yeah.
And then you're in a game. I mean, but getting blown away in the first quarter is something I'm sick of looking at in these fixtures.
Yeah, in times gone by, in this last 5 games, we've seen guys like Ireland have leaned on big performances from the likes of CJ Stander and James Ryan, and so it can be just so psychologically damaging to see James Ryan just get out and out beaten by Itoje. Itoje's winning the contacts on a guy who we never see go backwards, and CJ Stander's been sat down by Billy Vunipola, and that English train rumbles on, and that has been something that has killed Ireland. I mean, I think, like, if you want to take inspiration, I would look at Los Pumas in terms of, it's something that I think has been sorely missing from Ireland's game for a long while now, is the level of sort of raw emotional energy that they fed off from each other. Like, it seems kind of basic, but what Pablo Matero was saying, like, I play for my country, and just really wearing it on their sleeve, how much it meant to them to even be there, and how determined they were to represent their country as well as possible. Like, bringing that energy and feeding off that energy is how you get a big upset win. Like that, there's no other way to do it, and Ireland have done it in years gone by
in Twickenham,
but we haven't seen it for many years now.
True.
And it's definitely something. I just think taking inspiration from them flying out of the line, not missing tackles, being aggressive, being proactive on defence, saying, I know your name is Patrick Tuipulotu and you've been doing bits for Australia, I don't care, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to do everything in my power to win the contact and then win it a second time if you're still on the feet. Like, bringing that sort of raw emotional energy has been something Ireland have brought to games in the past. It's something they're absolutely going to need on defence here against England. If England are trying to sit you down, use their power game, bring in their class ball runners, Ireland are going to have to bring something extra.
Some big contacts. They need to be big momentum shifting tackles that
and supporting each other when they get them. Like, if I remember seeing it against the All Blacks in 2018, might have been the last game that Ireland put out a shift like that in. When you had a situation where I think Devon Toner caught Retallick, and Retallick was kind of stopped in his tracks, and then Ryan came in, and then they drove him back. They kept him on his feet and drove him back 10, 15 yards or something like that. That's just a massive... Obviously, everything's lacking for the lack of fans. Like, obviously Ireland are so great when the fans are responding to that, they're going mental. That's missing, but they do need to feed off that energy. They need to find a way to feed off their own energy, and put out a performance that is, enthusiastic and proactive and passionate, as compared to the sort of
so key. And then beyond that, then there's technical factors like go low, chop. Try and if there's a big tree coming at you, try and chop it down from the below. Don't just run head first into the trunk of it, like all of these little technical things. But I think primarily you've hit the nail on the head. It's that's been the distinction with this Irish team, particularly on D and particularly against England. It's just not really being at the pitch of the game, certainly not at the ferocity level and intensity level that England have brought at the beginning of these fixtures.
And England they get on top of the contacts, and then they bring a speed of ball and a quality of pass that's so difficult to live with. Ireland need to match the quality of the English quickness off the base of a ruck with their own quickness off line speed. They need to be just as quick and just as proactive as England are.
And with Aki and Farrell, you probably have the most defensively robust centre partnership that Ireland can field. So get them proactively smashing their guys.
Get them out of the line and trust. Like, you've got to give, I think, the likes of Aki and Farrell carte blanche to get out on the line and shut out the outside. You've got it. Like, they're good readers of a game in defence. They're good tacklers, both of them. Chris Farrell in particular has had some sensational performance on defence.
Against Sarries, actually, even he's shut down what was a formidable Sarries offence in Sarries' pomp a couple of years ago with his own just determined and very well executed reads.
I've seen him make great intercepts. I've seen him make phenomenal tackles. I've seen him completely shut down even great offenses in times gone by. So you have to trust him. And then what you have to do to make up for that is change the role of the scrum half on defence.
Where we were calling for it last week.
Fundamentally, it's just silly that, like, Gibson Park isn't Conor Murray. Murray's out of there, Gibson Park's in, which is good, and Gibson Park's a Kiwi scrum half. He needs to be covering the little chip. And you need to have the pendulum in full swing, where you have two back three players back and a 9 sweeping, so that the backfield is well and truly covered. Because that's somewhere
England are going to
after.
attacking kicks have been the death of us in these fixtures.
So you've got to trust one fewer man in the defensive line. You've got to trust your forwards to make their contacts and make their tackles, and then you've got to trust Chris Farrell to shut things down on the outside. with just the 12 or 13 men, the 12 men in the line, you've got to trust them to do that job and cover the backfield. Because if you don't, it's going to be rinse repeat what's happened so far. And dealing with those kicks, the quality of performance from the back three when they're there in terms of sweeping up that ball, not allowing England to get on top of them, dealing with it as quickly as possible and winning your forthcoming contact, or hopefully having a read on the kick such that you can catch it and kick it back before England get on top of you. Those are so key. Those are absolutely vital to Ireland's chances
for sure. So just on balance, then, what are you thinking for this game?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, as we say, what we are expecting and hoping to see from Ireland is a game with much more passion and much more mobility and physicality as well. Getting on top of England, catching them sluggish. Are England going to be complacent? Maybe. I think it'll take England being complacent for Ireland to win. I don't think Ireland are at the stage yet where they can beat England at their best
in Twickenham.
I just don't think so. England are very, very good, and I think Ireland are probably just a little too green at this stage. I think if England put their pressure game on, all I want to see from Ireland is not to be blown away again in that first quarter, as you say, and not to be at the front of the game and to make it a game, and then from there to actually get some offense going and hopefully score some tries.
That would all be lovely.
England very, very tough, very, very tough in Twickenham. I know it was only Georgia last week, but I was bloody impressed by them then as well, toying with the Georgians, and they're a phenomenal team. Maro Itoje might be the best footballer in the world, might be the best player. So it's just a stark task in my mind.
Yeah,
they have a chance. They always have a chance, but I have to think that England will have too much for us, and we'll find the tries, and we'll find the physicality. And even if the game is tight towards the end of it, that second half performance that Itoje likes to bring, and all of that physicality and all that playmaking they have in that forward pack, I suspect will be too much for us. And so I say England by 7 or 8.
Yeah, reasonable. Well, I'm going to do my usual thing and vote with my heart and say that Ireland score a famous victory this autumn and disrupt Eddie Jones in all of his double trophy plans.
It's not impossible.
No, it's not.
Just unlikely.
It is improbable, though, and I recognise that. But I am more optimistic about this Irish team. I think I like what we're trying to do.
I definitely think there's improvements. Yeah. I don't I'm not quite on the Andy Farrell out train that I might have been getting close to hopping on board. This is obviously a much more telling game than the Italy game or the Wales game. The only other game where we played a top team was France, and we went right back to our slow selves. We kicked balls into the sky to the best counter-attacking team in the world, and they counter-attacked and ripped us apart, and it was dumb as well as bad and awful to watch.
That's my main prevailing problem.
I just want to see Ireland show up and not play directly into the hands of their top quality opposition away from home. I want to see them disrupt them a little bit. I want to see us play smarter. I don't want to see us being stupid and kicking them the ball when that's exactly what they want you to do.
Indeed. Well, at their very best, I think Ireland's greatest attribute when they're at their very best is to be a clever team, not to be a smart bullying team, but to be a clever team and outthink you. So I would like to see a return to that form, because I don't think it's been the case for a couple of years that we've been outsmarting teams. I actually think especially when we go behind, we become one of the dumber teams in world rugby a lot of the time.
Desperate nonsense.
A lot of the desperado nonsense that comes out, I would rather see in a short performance. But I'm gonna vote green and say that we get a famous win.
I really hope so, but I just want a performance. That's all I want.
Yeah, fair enough. And with that, we will pivot on to that from that monster preview. But we will look at a couple of the other games from this weekend. We move on, of course, to Wales v Georgia, which is going to take place on Saturday as well. 5 p.m. kickoff local time here. It's going to be in Parky Scarlets again. Llanelli seemingly the home of Wales for this tournament. And the predictions are for a wet and windy day this Saturday in Wales.
With the caveat that actually it's a late kickoff. It's at 5 p.m. and so apparently there's some chance that the wettest and windiest of the windy weather might have passed by then.
Which would be nice. However, it would still mean a greasy ball and perhaps a slightly sluggish, sloppy game, which is probably good for Georgia.
Probably.
But as far as the colour of the game, well, obviously we have both of these teams are eyeing up this game as a chance to get a performance off at the very, very least, because Yeah, well, Georgia fresh off a tonking in Twickenham that they were never gonna see any other way, and then
listen, when this group was announced
well.
from a Georgian point of view, they would have been in horrors, thinking, Jesus, we got these World Cup semi-finals who bashed us in the pool last year, and then we got England and Ireland.
Yeah,
that's brutal. So actually, what has presented to them is a Welsh team under so much pressure.
Yeah.
That they're really going to think that actually maybe we have a chance to get some of our plays off here, and to maybe make a game of this
potentially.
So this is 100% going to be the game that they're targeting, and obviously, they haven't had much good prep, but they had a good hit out last week against England. And they didn't come out of it, black and bruised by the physicality. I think they were kind of warmed up by it.
Yeah,
they certainly didn't shrug off any contact.
No, they didn't shrink from the tackling. They were just outmatched and outgunned everywhere else. But they actually did commit to their tackles, and then couple that with just what Wales were showing against Ireland, and some of the softness, some of the silly plays in the contact, and some of the terrible scrums, terrible mauls that they were trying to get executed as well. There's definitely scope for Georgian optimism here, although they are still outmatched
and
underdogs
no
thoroughly.
But I mean, from a Wales point of view, 6-game losing streak, team at sea, awful performance against Ireland, awful. Really every area bested in, sloppy, bad passing, shocking defending,
just an
dreadful set piece.
Just a awful negative approach to the game on a macro scale as well. Yeah, they're a very confusing entity to look at, considering how great they were this time last year.
I think it was like about they slipped to 9th in the world rankings about a year out from when they were first.
Yeah,
they meandered into first just ahead of the World Cup after their winning streak from the Grand Slam that continued all the way to the World Cup semi-final against South Africa, which they lost by a point. To
the eventual champions.
It's incredible fall since then. But I mean, we obviously know they can be great, but they're under huge pressure. This Wayne Pivac regime, I think so far we've had the winning captain of the 2005 Grand Slam has come out and said that he should be, his position should be reviewed. Mm-hmm. The London Welsh owner of all people has come out and said he should be fired. I mean, the Welsh they are actually quite quick to get the knives out themselves when things go wrong. They're quite doom and gloom, and Pivac is under pressure. There's no doubt about it.
Well, he hasn't shown them anything to give them optimism at all. Some really poor stuff. And then just on a historical note, as far as colour as well, we had the last time these met, I think.
They met at the World Cup.
Yeah, they met at the World Cup, sorry. But a few years ago, 2017, November 18th.
3 years ago to this day.
There you go.
As we shoot this
on a Wednesday. But Georgia took them all the way. I think it finished, 13-7? 13-6. And the last set, I remember the last phase, was a repeated scrum with Georgia monstering their scrum on the line. It arguably could have been a penalty try.
Should have been a penalty try, as I recall. I mean, they should have got a draw out of that game, but as it happens, the ball got a bit scrappy off a Georgian scrum moving forward and went out, and the ref went...
Yeah.
And then I think it ended up being scrappy, and Wales ended up getting it and saving themselves.
Yeah.
The ref let Wales get out of jail, and they were thoroughly surprised by that game. So that should be in the minds of both teams.
To be honest, it should still be in Welsh memory. There were a lot of Welsh players who were playing in that game who will remember the threat that can be posed by them. But moving on then, just to both squads. We had one. No squad is named yet, but there is a leaked Welsh squad that
That's
we have.
right. The Telegraph has helped us out a little bit and reported. Now, if we're wrong about this, I want you to really let the Telegraph know.
Yeah, indeed.
But
tweet at them.
Yeah, they have apparently leaked, which isn't the most polite thing to do. But we had it all the time in the Joe Schmidt era in Ireland. Yes. The squad would leak before we'd name it. I actually prefer when coaches don't bother about that and just name their team when they know it. I almost prefer that to hiding their team.
Yes.
But apparently they're due to make 13 changes and ring the changes for this Georgian game.
It's hard to argue considering all those things we were saying. They've been god awful, and
I wonder, is it taking this game not seriously, or is this now his first team?
Is it lighting a fire under the first team by dropping them? But
for a Georgia game?
Yeah, probably isn't.
I don't know if that does that, so it's a curious one. What's interesting is Cardiff Blues flanker James Botham, who's been in good form in the Pro 14, has received a call-up.
There you go, yeah.
Because of the absence of a lot of back row depth with a lot of guys injured, your Moriartys and your Navidis, etc.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's 22 years old and he's he's a big blindside lock. He makes some good tackles, etc. He's abrasive and could be an interesting unit for them. But apparently he is to come straight in and start if this is to be believed.
Wow. That's an unusual thing, but then they are doing unusual things. Johnny McNichol, another one I'm excited to see added to the squad. He obviously missed out early on after picking up a little injury, so he missed out in the initial squad, but he is someone who is so dangerous. He's someone who Scarlets have been missing in his absence, and it's good to see him in the mix for Wales too, because he's great. The
team they're looking at is Wyn Jones at loosehead. He's actually one of the guys who'd be staying on. Obviously they had an injury to Rhys Carey. Well, actually they hauled him off.
They hauled him off because he was getting monsters.
Wyn Jones is actually it's not an injury at all. He's coming in.
It's just you can't set him out against the Georgians. They'll
humiliate him. Well, Wyn Jones is probably a better option than Rhys Carey on the basis of what we saw last week. Then we have Elliot D replacing Ryan Elias, whose line-out darts, among other things, have been all over the place.
It's true.
Samson Lee comes in at tight head.
That's welcome.
Alan Wyn Jones gets a rest, so Jake Ball and Seb Davies are in the locks. Tipperick is captain, given the captaincy with Botham the Bolter in there, and Wainwright as well, completing the pack at number 8, which is interesting.
Definitely.
Then we have Hardy from Scarlets at 9 and Sheedy at 10, which is telling because that means this is going to be a running game.
Yeah.
Williams, I think his name's Jordan Williams, coming in at Johnny Williams. Johnny Williams, one of the many Welsh Williamses, comes in at 12 with Tompkins back in the side at 13. So more runny.
They're going to try and run around them.
They're
It's probably wise.
And then the back three that they've selected, Louis Rees-Sammet, Johnny McNichol and Liam Williams, which is their best.
Probably their best back three. It's such
brilliant.
Fire. That is.
Although Josh Adams, to be fair,
they do have good back three options all throughout, but I think that this is such an exciting one. And as you say, they are not going to be looking to take George on up front as the bullish Eddie Jones guys did, but by the looks of this selection, if this is to be believed, they will be trying to run them ragged, which is probably it's the most proven way of getting around the Georgians. We've seen Argentina do it, we saw Australia do it, we saw Fiji do it.
The only issue is the weather, if it's going to be nice enough. But actually the quality of the surface matters a lot, and Parky Scarlets look pretty great the last time.
To be fair, running rugby, this Parky Scarlets is no stranger to running rugby.
And the surface there is pretty decent. From a Georgian point of view, we don't have any leaked starting 15s. No. Unfortunately, it will be interesting to see if Otar Giorgadze comes back into the team, because
he's a ferocious
he was
player.
Huge off the bench wearing the number 19 shirt, scattering Englishmen like Skittles when he came on, and he's a great lock. He can play in lock, he can play in back row, but he needs to be out there.
He's just big and
very,
physical,
very strong,
especially against quite a green, disjointed Welsh pack. You'd want to see some big heft for the Georgians. There's also Aprasidze. Will he stay in the 9 shirt?
Or will they go back to Lobson?
I thought Aprasidze is probably a better option for them there.
He looked good. He looked better probably.
Yeah, and then the other question is Soso Matiashvili, the box office one. He was dropped for last week. And to be fair, they used the boot of Kamladze on exit and stuff, so he was a useful link in there. Question mark as to whether they want to go back to Soso. How do they want to play it? But he's obviously an option there for them too.
We're going to look on now at the conditions for each side, and we're going to preview the game from the point of view of each side. So we'll start with the home side, who is Wales. And first of all, with the ball, what are they looking to do in terms of, we have an indication from their squad.
Yes.
I think it's interesting with the wet and windy weather. Hopefully it'll pass and they'll be able to move the ball. The Georgians do struggle when teams move it wide against them. They're much less tough in the wide channels than they are in the narrow channels. They're much less effective in their tight, in their just first up tackling when there's more space out there. And that said, they brought a good bit of line speed against England. They did not go backwards in the contact, and England, at times things could struggle a little.
Yeah.
And how England managed to do it against them was by controlling the territory game.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they've gone for this running team against
Hardy
Georgia,
and Sheedy,
when actually your best method of really just stopping the Georgians from getting into the game at all, in my view, is to own the territory game. They're not good at exiting. They don't have as strong a kicking game as Wales are going to have. And I think that the smart approach, if not the one that Wales fans would be loving, would be in the middle of the pitch to pin the Georgians back, to make sure that they don't have any control in the territory. Like last week against England, they spent 39 seconds in the English 22.
Yes, yeah,
in the whole game,
which is the only place they feel really confident and comfortable going through the
tier
phase.
2. They spend 90% of the game in the opposition 22. That's the only place they want to play rugby. But at this level, their territory game, their mastery of the kicking game, is not near what the tier 1 sides are bringing.
It's not.
And so from a Welsh point of view, I mean, they're probably going to start based on the selection that we think they're going to go with. They're probably going to start by moving the ball wide, by trying to get outside the Georgians, which is a decent tack because they can get narrow and they can struggle out there. They held their width decently against England, but on a couple of occasions, England, through Jonathan Joseph, managed to get outside them.
England only really started threatening with their passing game in the last quarter. They really smashed at them and kicked them.
Apart from that Jonathan Joseph play where they managed to get
for the fourth try before half time, that kind of stuff.
That was good, but that's definitely the area Wales are looking to target. But if the Georgians are stymieing them at all and winning the contacts, I wouldn't mind seeing them. I really don't think it's the worst play in the world to put pressure on the Georgians, make the Georgians exit, make them work for everything, don't let them get in.
And it doesn't need to be hardy box kicking and back and forth. I think Sheedy will have to step up because it's his first start. So if he is to start, and then recognizing that if it's not going anywhere, or if the risk outweighs the reward, or if there's just space in the backfield, identifying it and executing the kick to put the Georgians on their heels and turn them. Because turning this Georgian pack, they can only turn and retreat so many times against a tier 1 side before their spirit's kind of gone in the context of the game. So a few clever probing kicks coupled with some nice hands and some good tempo, because I think those two halfbacks will bring tempo that will be enough to incite fear in the Georgians. But where it could go wrong is if you're getting a little loose, creating those scrums, slowing the game, dropping balls, slowing the game down. Then
they have to be if they've obviously picked a brave team. So it's all about then like the absolute fire that they have in that back three between Liam Williams, Louis Rees-Zammit.
And if you can have a Sheedy Williams axis that is linking and distributing, and then you can access the wide channels.
Even Tompkins is a lovely footballer, and Johnny Williams can play 10 as well. So I mean, in terms of distributors, they're not for lacking. I would keep Liam Williams wide and absolutely try and get the hands though of like Louis Rees-Zammit and Johnny McNichol are beautiful finishers.
Such good finishers,
and those guys will have way too much for the Georgians in the wide channels if they can just be put in space.
So that first port of call, put them in space, but be accurate. You want
to
stand
be deep in the line. Don't let them pressure you at all with any line speed, and just get it to the wide channels and start making plays when Tompkins gets his hands on the ball. And that's where the Georgians have struggled in times gone by, and that's definitely an area they should look to pressurize. But don't neglect the kicking game. I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
And I think broadly as well, like even it's a risk because they're short of confidence. This is a chance for them to get back. So you want to be quick, but you don't want to rush. If you know what I mean. Like, you don't want to force things too early and then create those scrums, because then in your efforts to inject a bit of tempo, you're going to remove all the tempo because it's going to be a scrum, and we're going to reset that scrum, and then the Georgians are going to fancy it. And so be quick but be smart, and don't rush or don't panic. You are still a tier 1 top side. You do have too much for this Georgian side in all likelihood. So be patient, as you say, be probing with the kicks, but also get them. And ultimately, you want to get your danger men on the ball, attacking space and converting a load of tries, because that's kind of what the Welsh fans deserve and need from their team, is to eventually break this Georgian side down and score some tries.
100%, and absolutely that'll be the mindset in terms of when Georgia have the ball and what Wales are going to have to do from a defensive point of view. They know what Georgia are going to bring. Georgia are going to bring tight contacts that are ferocious in nature. They're going to try and sit you down. They are extremely strong, and you'd be fools to underestimate the strength that the Georgians are going to bring when they have the bill.
And they're tough. You don't want to, certainly some of the silly penalties they were giving away against Ireland. That's Georgia love that. Like against tier 2, they
slow everything down. They win a contact. Wales don't roll away. Penalty. Everyone just chills,
stops,
and then this is where people are watching the game are going, what's going on? What are things on? Someone's down there tying their laces. They slowly kick it to the line out. They go to 2, scramble, get the ball back to the base, and then they just slowly carry and win the contacts. And if you give away penalties, you will play them in. So discipline, vital.
And it has been at sea for Wales. It's got to be their first focus on defence. It's just cut out whatever this nonsense they're trying to bring, be it prickly or whatever you want to call it. Just stupid is another word for it. Where if you're shoving a guy or slapping a guy off the ball in front of the ref, coach killing errors that will punish you every single time, and it is the one way you can play Georgia into the game, because as you said, they're not very good at exiting. You just generally you want to bottle them up in the middle of the field, make your tackles, one in every 3, try and be dominant and drive them back, and then force the box kick out of them, which will be probably a bit too far, judging by historical evidence. Try and force them to box kick it away to you, and then you can counter attack where your key weapons are. You have Liam Williams, the bomb diffuser back there, force them to kick.
And Johnny McNichol. I mean, it's an awesome back 3 if they can link up off kick return. There's definitely that aspect to it. From a pride point of view, the Welsh Tide 5 have been beaten up now in a few games. Scotland, I think, really got the edge on them. Ireland demolished them last week. The Georgians are big and strong, and they should be trying to see this as another big challenge where they can get up and redeem themselves a bit. Making some big tackles is vital. If it's a wet day, we say it suits the Georgians, but at times, like Georgia made 17 handling errors last week.
Yeah, see, it suits the Georgians from a limited point of view. You still
they're physical, but they're not that technical in terms of what they're doing in the contact. And I definitely think if you're a smart Welshman, this is why it's curious that Alan Jones isn't involved, but they backed themselves to win it without him, which is fine. Like attacking the pill in contact is huge.
Swinging arms at the ball carrier,
trying to get rips in, hold him up for a second just to get that ball spilling out, because a lot of them, they hurdy-dur and they carry like a ball tucked in like this, which on a wet day is dislodgeable, etc.
Or rippable, or just disruptable in general. You need to...
Generating turnovers by doing that is definitely a good picture, and it's one of the more demoralising ones for Georgia. Like if they're actually getting on top and they have the ball like they want to have it, and then they sloppily knock it on, or they sloppily get it taken away.
It'll break their heart, and your heart can only take so much breaking and if the back 3 are going to be accurate and convert off the turnovers they get, that's got to be the recipe and the key for this Welsh defence. But the main one is discipline. That's my main focus.
Discipline and tackling as well. I mean, Georgia in the second half in Twickenham moved the ball a little bit. They actually got some nice tempo going. They had a couple of good runs from Becca Gregadze in the blue scrum cap at number 8. He's got to be watched. They do have to have men on him. Tipperick, I would nominate perhaps as the guy to really keep your eyes on Becca Gregadze and make sure he doesn't get anything off.
Low and stop them low.
And then blitz when they are trying to go wide. Like they have some decent offloads in them, but they don't really know what they're doing.
A tier 1, a Six Nations caliber line speed will do for that Georgian handling stuff. They're just not, as you say, technical enough to execute under that pressure. So bring the pressure, bring the blitz. You have quick
100%.
centres there. Get them up in the face of young Tato Absendadze and all of these guys. And disrupt that passing game, force them to kick loosely to you and pounce on turnover. That's got to be the Welsh plan. And then as far as the set piece is concerned, it could be the making a break into the game, potentially. For the Georgian scrum did battle valiantly. They were bested by England, but not blown away by England. The first 10 minutes they combated that scrum until eventually the pressure told. And conversely, the Welsh scrum has been rubbish in the last year. They've been bested by Scotland, by Ireland.
They brought in Thomas Francis and Will Rowlands to try and shore it up, and neither did. But Rowlands thinks they're going to be gone.
Awful with his chance. And I was excited for him. He's been good for us, but he was awful last week, especially against Ireland. He was at fault for one of the tries. He softed out of that Quinn Rue hit. He was not much heft in the scrum. He nearly coughed up another try at his own line out. So they've been a bit rudderless at set piece a lot of the time, and they have chopped and changed their personnel. And the Georgians will fancy this aspect of the game. They will be up for it. And if it's a wet and windy day and it does end up being handling error driven and a sloppy kind of slow affair, that'll play the Georgians in.
The scrum dynamic is massive. The Georgians obviously starting with Nariashvili. They like an 8-man shove. They like to get low. They like to be powerful. They like to shock teams with straight scrummaging and just getting on top of them and turning their props in and just driving over the ball.
They do.
Ideally, what the Georgians are looking to bring actually is almost an against the head win where they just drive straight over a team. They're very disciplined in the way that they go about that.
It's true.
Which is that's definitely a positive for them. If Wales can lock it down, conversely, obviously that takes a huge weapon away from Georgia. But I wouldn't underestimate it. Like Georgia are a brilliant scrummaging team. I think even what's your man's name? The number 17, the replacement loosehead, Gogi Chashvili. He scrummages supremely aggressively, and he even got into trouble a few times with Nigel Owens, who just wasn't letting him scrum aggressively, giving out to him at every turn. But I think Luke Pearce might be a little more accommodating. Certainly, if last week is anything to go by, you could argue he tipped the scales in favour of Italy a little bit. Maybe he likes an underdog team. But they should, if Georgia attack this scrum and get on top of it, it could be a messy game. I don't think Wales can underestimate that. I mean, locking the scrum down would be all but win it for them, but if they can't do that, then all of a sudden it gets tough, because you knock on, all of a sudden you're in your own half.
Yeah, and then if you're losing the scrum routinely, and you've gone with this disjointed, changed front five and whole back and whole team, and Alan Wynn's not in there, like suddenly the wheels can come off, and Georgia can love that. So the set piece is a pivotal part of the game, and particularly the scrum. At the line out, to be honest, both sides were a mess last week. At line out time, Elias's darts for Wales, completely errant all of the time. They were turned over constantly all over the pitch, regardless of the circumstance. And similarly, Georgia weren't quite a disaster, but they're just so telegraphed. They literally only jump at 2. They don't put any shape or movement on the ground. They just set the pod up at 2 and jump and win it at 2, and then get driven into touch or a toe jeed.
Well, this is where Wales, like somebody, it's obviously not going to be Wyn Jones if he's not playing, but or Alan Wyn Jones if he's not playing, but somebody does need to take control of that line out, whether it's Seb Davis or Jake Ball needs to take
or even
ball.
Tipperick if he wants to call it.
Call some simple throws to themselves. Obviously, LAD is that bit, I think, sharper at line out throwing than Ryan Elias. And so it's got to be a case of shoring it up, calling some simple throws to yourselves, because if you can get a maul going, Georgia's maul defence is at sea, and then you can really turn the line out into a weapon of your own. And you should put some jumpers up when Georgia are throwing it in as well. You should never give them easy ball off the
jump
line
at 2 every time. Send Tipperick up there, because my God, they do telegraph it. And then restarts as well. A good opportunity for both of them to get an edge in the territory, particularly Georgia. It would be nice if they can pin them back and force them to exit sloppily and maybe get offence off. But it'll just be interesting to see which approach either of them take. So they're going to go shallow and try and regather. Wales might be bullish enough to do a little bit of that. It might be ill-founded though. But I think for Georgia, try and pin them back, try and get your chase right, because some of the Georgian chasing of kicks, it can be kick-offs but also box kicks. Like a kick is only as good as its chase, and sometimes Georgia's chase is not so good.
That's huge. Absolutely, that's true. Absolutely, that's true. The kick chase is vital. Just in terms of moving on and looking at the game this time, sort of from the perspective of the underdogs, the away side, Georgia, when they have the ball, what they're looking to do against Wales. One of the markers for them is to get some points on the board. I mean, obviously this stems from managing your way around the field, but the fact that they've notched up 7 points in their 2 games that they've had since their return of rugby from lockdown is going to be just a real area.
Surely that should be their focus. They got to try and score more points, because they really you can't get away with that. You can't win any games if you're not scoring enough points.
What they do like to do at their very best is make games frustrating, and how they do it is by being just a little tighter than they have been so far, in the sense that they're dominating contacts. They're going to play short, they're going to play off 9, they're going to play with a slightly slower tempo, but getting good latchers, minding the pill is a huge area of focus. The 17 handling errors, those need to be like 5 in terms of the handling errors. They really need to sharpen up that area of the pitch. Mind the ball, get a couple of latchers, and drive yourselves into Wales and just frustrate them. Recreate that picture time and time again. Maintain your discipline. A couple of times Nige gave penalties against them for going in at the side or going off their feet in the ceiling. That can't happen. You've got to be totally clinical at the offensive breakdown and the offensive carry. Win your contact, yes. Get your latchers in. Get it up. Get the dominant contact. Get to ground. Present the ball well. Latchers, hold your feet.
Yes. All vital.
Then the ruck is over. Then you can slow it up. Do the same thing with a different pot of forwards. And then they have some very talented carriers within that dynamic, and they can be an absolute balls to defend against, because you can't get the ball off them at their best.
And then if you couple that with Wales's propensity to give away frustration-based penalties, then you can play yourself into the 22. But also, like you say, your main point about Tier 2 attack, not just Georgian attack, is mix up the kicking game.
Yes.
For God's sake, don't just box kick it down Liam Williams-Throat all day.
Yeah. That's where like Tato Absendanza comes in, and he's obviously a young 10 who they're going to have to put a lot of faith in. He had a rough enough day of it in Twickenham. He still has corner kicks in him.
He does.
And finding grass and kicking deep and owning the territory game, or at least getting some parity in the territory game, is going to be massive from a Georgian point of view. That's important. But I genuinely think the main thing, like obviously managing their way around the field is vital, but once they can get that picture where they have a bit of attack, I think dialing their own minds in to winning the contacts and protecting the ball would be massive, because within that narrow context, they're extremely big and strong, and they should fancy getting after a Wales, change strip who they who they might be selecting this week.
And a slightly lighter Wales team that's built to maybe try and get around them. You try and go through them, try 100%. And punch through them, but do so, as you say, accurately and protect that pill.
Otto Giorgadze should come into the side. He's brilliant, very strong. Saganadze, very, very strong. Becker Gergadze, obviously brilliant player, very good ball player as well.
All of them.
Excited about those guys.
Even their centres in the midfield, they're big, hardy bucks who'll fancy the contact. The collision zone is not there. They're no stranger to Georgia. It'll be their friend if they're to get anything off in this game.
Nick Tompkins has really struggled in the Six Nations. He had lost his place because of defensive frailty. I think genuinely they really should try and emphasise, even in the middle of the pitch, because their kicking game has lacked, keeping their hands on the ball and frustrating the hell out of Wales, what that takes is discipline and accuracy, holding the ball, not dropping it. It's kind of like Joe Schmidt ball, what he was trying to do, which at its best had its moments against Wales, especially if it was playing a change Wales team like this. You'd back a bit of Schmidt ball, and that's what Georgia need to bring: holding the ball, lots of rucks, but doing it accurately is the key here.
And it's been the key difference between them being effective and not.
And then obviously when you can get a penalty, you launch it in the corner, you hold the ball, then you do it again. You spend ages and ages and ages working the position, frustrating the Welsh defence, and then eventually, hopefully, scoring
crashing
a try.
over for a try. Is their ideal picture on offense.
What Georgia need to have to win this game, statistically, they need to probably own the territory, and they need to spend a lot of time in the Welsh 22, but they need to own the possession game as well. They need to have more of the ball. If Wales have more of the ball, you can tell me that stat alone, and I already know what's happening. If you give me Wales 60% possession, it's a blowout.
To be honest, even Wales 50% possession is a blowout. If you want Georgia to keep the score down or get in them with a chance of winning it, they kind of need to have 60% plus. At the very least, 70% Georgian possession is probably their best chance of winning the game. Now it's very unlikely, but it starts with accuracy.
Hold the ball, be accurate, resource that breakdown and exploit Welsh mistakes. Beat them in the contact and exploit their mistakes, and then all of a sudden you're in a position to make things happen.
For sure. But that being said, when Wales do have the ball, because I'd imagine Wales will have the ball slightly more than 30% of the time.
One would expect.
So Georgia will have to up their game a little in defence. Obviously, I was impressed with their first up tackling against the English, and I'd expect I will be again. They are strong in the contact zone either side of the ball. The question mark is when it gets a little wider, sometimes they can be a little slacker on their defence in terms of their first up tackling, but also things like chasing, the line speed they bring sometimes when it gets a little wider is slack, and the cohesion.
It would make you question their fitness.
Yes, it would.
When they're chasing kicks. It's like they're taking a break.
Which is just painful to look at because it invites, if you do that against this Welsh team, look at what they picked in the backfield. Those guys are going to run right around you. They need to be committed to, whenever they do box kick it up there, chase after it for God's sake, and do so cohesively.
Get after it as well, and get after Wales from a line speed point of view if they're trying to sit deep and move it wide as well. They're pretty good at holding their width against England, generally speaking. They were. Just a couple of deceptive nice running plays ended up opening
a few times off first phase their setup can be bad. That's where they're a little slack, like we saw it in the World Cup on that inside line off the line out. That caught them cold game after game, and then against England we saw one out wide where they weren't numbered up and England got outside them, and it's like that first phase defensive structure can be a little bit off, and Wales will probably be looking to exploit that. So I would like to see a bit more of an improvement in
some good line speed and some good contacts is key here, just to slowing up the Welsh and owning the ball. Also breakdown play, they have good breakdown players in there themselves.
They like the contact zone.
If Wales are getting the edge of a contact, getting in there, trying to get your hands on the ball, big steals, playmaking, going to be massive for Georgia if they can get anything off.
And again, discipline and accuracy is the key here. Don't be giving away the stupid penalties, don't be flopping off your feet, entering not through the gate. All of that stuff will kill them. If the onus is on them as the inferior and the underdog team to be as accurate and as up for it and as just game for the fight, but also just
disciplined, controlled.
They need to put in their best possible showing to have any chance. So it starts with discipline and control.
100%.
With all that said, what do you think's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't even know. We obviously heard that leaked Welsh team. I don't even know if I approve of that or not. In a fun kind of way. Wales are in this weird space. It's a change strip for a game against a Georgian team that were at times impressive in the contact. I think that Georgia will have some moments. They struggled mighty with Scotland, but I think Scotland are better than this Wales team.
They are.
Wales have picked a team to try and move it around, so I think if the weather holds off, they should be able to execute that. But they're a team with brittle confidence, and if they make errors and let Georgia in the game, Georgia have a good chance of making a scrap of this. And I'm going to say they make a scrap of this. I saw enough in that game against England in that first half where they weren't as far away at times as I might have feared away in Twickenham.
Yeah.
In that they weren't shocked by the contact. They were able to get some plays off.
They managed to keep it to 40 rather than 50.
Well, indeed, but also like in that first half, obviously England punished them, and if they switch off Wales and punish them, and that'd be a shame to see. But I'm going to say they do keep it tight and keep it scrappy, and that Wales flounder and struggle, and so I don't know if I can say they win the game. It's just too much.
Yeah, it might be too much.
But maybe 19-12 or something to Wales, like maybe tight,
Scrappy
maybe another
game.
one like the one 3 years ago.
Another squeaky bum time final whistle.
Yeah.
Georgia,
which would be real pressure mounting on
huge
Pivac.
pressure on Pivac. It's
But
like, listen, it's a win.
But
Win's a win.
Yeah. But I think yeah, especially when you consider Wales' recent record, I think that there's scope for the Georgians to show up, and I think the Georgians will. I think they have a performance in them. Like I think they have obviously fallen away, but I really like they didn't show up at the World Cup. They haven't really arrived yet here, but I saw enough in that Twickenham game where I think maybe they do have a big performance in them. So I'm going to say that this is I'm going to say that they pull one out here.
Fair enough. I suspect that their inability to create scores will cost them, and that Wales, despite being loose and probably being scrappy at times, they'll probably win by a little more. Maybe a 21 point win, 21 point win for Wales or something along those lines. Less comprehensive than England because they're not as comprehensive as England, but I still think their ability to score will be what sees them through against a Georgian team that are struggling to find scores.
It's probably true.
Yeah. And on to the final fixture of the Autumn Nations Cup this weekend between Scotland and France. It's the Sunday game. It's going to be on the 22nd of November at 3 o'clock kickoff in Murrayfield in Scotland, so home advantage for the Scots. And it is going to be refereed by Wayne Barnes, who found himself on TMO duty last week and being hilarious.
Yeah, he gave us one of the gemmy moments of the weekend when Xander Fagerson went over and he was chatting back about it. He was like, oh yeah, and then 3 trundles over.
Yeah, one of the funniest tries ever scored, that Xander Fagerson try. I can't fathom what the Italians were doing there, but it was hilarious.
Oh, it was ridiculous. Bellini in particular,
just standing off looking at the ref.
Yeah.
And it's reasons like that they never win games. But anyway, back to this game. If forecasts are to be trusted, then it's going to be cool and windy day in Edinburgh, but clear skies, 8 Celsius and about 35 km/h winds is what's being forecast.
It's clear skies, so no wetness, but 8 Celsius, quite cool one.
That's
and,
true.
Heavy winds. They're the heaviest winds of the weekend.
Yes,
so,
and considering how far north we are, like it's Scotland in November, we won't expect too much, and then we'll be pleasantly surprised if anything.
It has a factor in terms of France as well. They don't really love the cold. I think they prefer to be playing in Sydney this weekend than Edinburgh.
Sydney, but for sure. But as far as the colour of the game, though, from France's perspective, it is now going to be their last outing with their first team, considering the LNR views. That was set to be last week in Fiji, but that game obviously didn't go ahead, cancelled due to COVID, so the first selected team for France, the first selected squad, still available for this week, so we'd expect them to continue before they ring the changes. And in terms of this season, their one blip of the season, that first team that has had a tremendous season apart from it, came against Scotland. So they will, like as is the case with France this November, they missed out on the chance last week to avenge that Fiji demon. They did exercise the demons of Ireland in Paris and put them to the sword, and they'll be looking to remedy this against Scotland as well. So they'll be out for vengeance here, I make no doubt.
Yeah, and it's obviously the last game of the season for a lot of these guys. First team players.
You want to sign off on a high note rather than a kind of an annoying, frustrating one.
And has been a very good season for them.
For sure.
Scotland, on the other hand, are in decent shape. They've had a very good season, 5 wins on the bounce. They have lost their 2 out halves and have struggled to get their offense going in as a consequence of that. Indeed,
just as far as your 5 in a row goes, just for the colour, they've done that twice this century, the last time being in 2011, and should they win this game and make it 6, that'll be the first time they've gone 6 in a row since 1990. Apparently.
It's not often done.
It's not.
So non-all-black teams.
So there's undoubtedly a very good period of play for both these teams, Scotland and France, kind of feeling good about themselves. Scotland will be a little rocked by their showing last week. Obviously, they've lost 2 10s. Their attack did look blunter for it. They struggled against an Italian side that we know aren't for the struggling against. If you're a top team, you can put them to the sword.
Yeah,
they will be buoyed by the fact that they got themselves four scores, 4 tries, bonus point win, get out of Dodge, and so that's very encouraging. But this is obviously a much bigger test, so they'll be nervous going into it.
100%. From the point of view of the squads, Scotland obviously have some interesting decisions to make. They lost Rory Sutherland last week.
That is a huge loss. We were only singing his praises. He brought a new bite and a new energy and a new aggression to that Scottish scrum. Now Keble is a very, very capable
who was great off the bench.
Lieutenant to him, was great off the bench. But the question is, what comes off the bench this time with
the
Sutherland
answer is Jamie Batty.
Jamie Batty probably. Yeah, we were thinking Schoeman might be an option, but he was togged out again for Edinburgh against Leinster on Monday, and Batty is the one
Batty's the guy in the squad. So it'll be Jamie Batty, which is definitely a weakness, but still a solid scrum. Again, like I don't see France getting the edge against them. Xander Fagerson is sort of the hidden gem of the Scottish side. He hasn't got all the plaudits that Sutherland has got, but he's scrummaged aggressively.
Considering how much of a stalwart Nell had to be in there a few years ago, because he was the only way to shore it up at tight head. Now Nell is being sprung from the bench, and you have a quality guy starting for you, grabbing hilarious tries in Rome, doing top-notch things. So we're big Xander Fagerson fans.
Yeah, so the squad still has a lot of heft and a lot of physicality to it. Obviously, one of the questions that, for my money, they have yet to answer is what to do at 10, which is, with the situation.
Is Weir really their best choice?
He didn't look great. There are people picking him in their team of the week, which I thought was bizarre, because for my money, he really didn't get much going.
One of the worst parts of their whole life.
Yeah,
all of the offense they did get going for the tries came off 9 or off the maul.
There were a few occasions where he was in position to throw that Russell pass, and he just didn't or couldn't and wouldn't.
And it was his missed tackle that gave the Italians their try.
Yeah, he knows his own limitations, and there's value in that. Maybe he is a guy who likes to step up to the criticism and respond with a big performance, but he's much more limited than what the options they have had. So I wonder. I'm not sure if they will look at a Stewie Hogg or bringing in a Pete Horn, but
Pete Horn has been there for Glasgow doing it. It might be a better passing option, just in terms of a like for like stylistically with Hastings and Finn as their go-to guys. Like I know he's a little looser, and we're not huge fans of Horn and 10, but he's definitely more in that mould. And there were a few instances where Weir was in position, and there were guys, it just looked like that pass was missing from their toolkit, and that has been their main avenue for success in terms of their backline multi-phase, is that sexy pass that is coming often from Finn, but sometimes from Hastings.
So they definitely have concerns there. Likewise, Jamie Ritchie apparently could be in doubt, which is huge.
Himself and Fraser Brown are actually both undergoing their HIAs as it stands now. The teams haven't been named when we're shooting this on Wednesday, but Ritchie and Fraser Brown in a race to try and make themselves available for it, so they're still a doubt this weekend. And then similarly, Antemac is out with for France. This is for an unspecified injury. We couldn't find the details of it, but we do know that the uncapped Louis Carbonell has replaced him in the squad, Toulon man. Very good player himself, kind of out now 10. So that's an interesting one.
Carbonell comes in, and they don't have to worry about drafting guys in anymore, because everyone who comes in new who hasn't played yet can play for the rest of the window. That's
right,
which is good from a top couture's point of view. I see him Sekou Makalu down here, who's making headlines because he's going to come into the French squad in the next couple of weeks. He was brilliant. He's a brilliant open side flanker who was superb for Stade Francais, and there's a lot of hype about him. But for this week, I think they will likely resort to the team that has been set and go with something similar. I'm curious to see what they do at 10. They have plenty of options. They could go with Dupont in there. They could go with Ramos in there, although I'd be surprised. They could bring Carbonell straight in and start him and keep the system going. It's not actually as game breaking a position for them as it is for other teams.
And the question is, Dupont is your main playmaker from 9. Do you want to change that? You could obviously Baptiste Saran with Dupont at 10.
Reads pretty nice to me.
Reads pretty nice, but I think it's probably less effective for them. I think Dupont is their playmaker from 9, and I think Carbonell could slot straight in as a like for like change without rocking the boat as much as taking your main playmaker out of 9. But we will remain to see what decisions they make as far as that. They do have options. Options aplenty,
and it's not going to stop them either way, playing with the same flair and offensive approach.
35 km/h winds and a bit of wet and rain could disrupt them in that potentially.
But it's not going to be raining apparently. It's going to be clear skies with cold wet conditions, but a serious wind.
So just moving on to the game itself, we will look, as we have done with all the games, we'll look at the attacking, the winning conditions for both sides and what they will look to do on either side of the ball. And we're going to start with the hosts, which are Scotland. So when Scotland are attacking, what are they looking to do? I think like this is the point of main concern coming from that Italian showing, was just how much blunter they looked without their first two choice 10s.
No question.
They were a lot more off. It was all off Ali Price really, and it was kind of in the second half. It was the physicality of their forwards and like things like their line-out drive that kind of bailed them out of there and created some of the scores that they did get. But they were a little bludgeoning.
Well, the bludgeoning is an element that they're going to have to bring. It's an element that they brought when they beat France back in the Six Nations. They are going to look to get on top of those contacts. They have a brutally strong tight five and forward pack in general. Hamish Watson is getting into his top form, which is a danger for France for sure. So just getting on top of those contacts around the fringes is going to be huge for them. They also have absolute danger. They do have danger in that back three. Hogg's form is good. Duhan van der Merwe, superb.
He is the form attacking player for them. He came in to grab that try when they needed it in the first half. Probably the most important try for them to keep them in touch in that first half.
And Darcy Graham likewise can finish from anywhere as well. The centres, they're decent. What they're missing really is the distribution from 10, which is why I'd like to see Hogg really come in, and even with whoever it is, if it's Duncan Weir, etc., I'd like to see Hogg take some responsibility off him and come in and try and distribute. The centres do pick good lines. I think
nearly linked for that would have been a Duncan Weir try. Actually, they got you saw a glimpse of what they could create on offense. It was a shame that the final pass did go forward from
that's right,
Johnson.
But Johnson and Harris are superb players. Like they pick nice lines. They're not the most flash in the world, but they do run off one another, and they will look to punch holes, especially if it's if there's a bit of softness in the French defence and the cold.
Which there could be,
like if they can get on top. Those guys picking lines in the tight is how they get our initial plays going, and then getting the ball wide, trying to get the likes of Van der Merwe and Darcy Graham into the game. If things are a little blunt, if they're not able to get to the outside and France are shutting it down, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have Duhan van der Merwe come in a little narrow, run inside, balls off the 10s.
He has shown willingness to do that. Or off the 9s. A lot of it has come through Ali Price. If Duncan Weir or whoever they pick there isn't quite cutting it, then it will narrow up and come off 9. And picking the good lines off 9 and 10 is really the difference between dominant carries or not for them. Because trundling into touch slowly, or trundling into contact slowly and in a telegraph fashion, French will love that. But if you can bring a little deception, a little verve, a little tempo to your own game, you know that this French defence can be
we saw it a couple of weeks back in the Ireland game. We as much as that was a comfortable win for France, there were moments in that game where they really were struggling to just deal with being in the wrong area of the pitch and having to make tackles. And that's what Scotland need to bring. Like they need just a little bit of versatility. Obviously, some speed from Ali Price would be nice. But putting them under pressure, constantly carrying dynamic carries with sharp lines being picked onto soft shoulders. If you can bust your way through a few contacts, this is where France get very frustrated.
It's true.
They don't have too many jacklers in their team, and they like to have the ball.
Yeah.
So if Scotland can hold the ball and rumble, get some phases going, get the edge going with their many classy ball runners of Hamish Watsons and Sam Johnsons, that's the rhythm that they're trying to create. And then they have players to take tries 100% in the wide channels.
They will need to, but that is definitely their recipe. What about when they're defending though? The French love to attack them and love to attack all teams. So the Scottish defence will obviously have a task containing what is quite a dangerous, quite a tempo-filled, exciting team.
They conceded a pretty soft try against Italy as well, straight after they'd scored. France will score all day.
In that kind of space, if you fall off a tackle
loose
like
kicking
that,
is one area where I'd say like the Ali Price box kicks, something that Ireland did against France 2 weeks ago, and it just played them into the game. Right when they were struggling, it was just
Ali Price is going to slow everything down. Be told to use it, and then 6 seconds later get pinned for
their
not
instincts.
Using it.
France's instincts are superb, and they're so confident at the moment. When Sexton put a bomb up and Boutier caught it, and instantly everyone was dialed in, and they ran in and scored a superb try. I think Endemak got the touchdown, but it was made by Dupont and Boutier. But their list of classy attackers is as long as their backline. They've Vakatawa can come in; he's a sensational footballer himself. And Gael Ficou is in flying form. Great footwork, great link up play. They try and get it to the wide channels and link up so well with one another. Pick such smart lines and very rarely make handling errors. So from a Scottish point of view, I think your first port of call is to hold your width. You can't allow yourself to get sucked in, and the way that you can hold your width is if you are making good strong tackles on the inside. France will move it back, move it off first phase. They'll try to move it wide. the importance of the Johnson-Harris dynamic is massive in terms of getting them up and making sure there's just no holes on that inside of the field.
That's vital because they have a serious job containing Vakatawa. If Vakatawa can get in between those two centres and get a hand away, which he can, we know, but that's obviously it's a terrible picture for Scotland. Your two key defensive players in the back line are out of the game and the ball's away. That's France all day long. But between those, you need to have guys in the tight just denying them any progress. Your Watsons, your Thompsons, your Greys, your Cumminses, they need to win their collisions.
Absolutely.
When they're first up with a Frenchman running down their channel, drive him back.
And that's something they've been good at. Something they've been good at. And it's something they didn't give France any soft entrances to the game back in the Six Nations, and as a result, France couldn't really do much in the cold in Murrayfield, and they were caught cold and they weren't really able to get outside them. And that's what Scotland need to bring, just making sure that they have that width, even when France are in the middle of the field, spread out on both sides of the ball, eyes open, and just force them to make plays on the inside in order to open up the outside, because France want to be on the outside.
They do.
That's
so if you can force them narrow and then couple dominant tackles with a breakdown menace, because as much as France don't have jacklers, Scotland very do. They have jacklers and harriers and disruptors,
depending on whether we have Richie or Fraser Brown in, either of them can be great, and obviously Hamish Watson,
even McAnally, if he's in there, can do so as well. These guys make their bread and butter out of slowing the ruck ball of France down, forcing them into narrow collisions that they're not winning, and then slowing it down.
If they can get on top of the breakdown, that's a huge entrance to the game.
So it's mind your discipline. Obviously, you could be pinned if you're getting reckless or just throwing hands in there when you oughtn't. You don't need to be doing that, but be disciplined, but be smart.
Be disciplined, hold your width, beat their pack.
Yes,
and those are the three battles. Because Scotland, 5 wins on the bounce, they're going to be confident about their ability to get plays off, especially in the tight areas, which is where they won most of these games. It hasn't been Finn Russell. No. These 5 games, he's played. Did he play one of them against Georgia?
Yeah. But he came off the bench against Georgia.
Well, there you go. And then he got injured. So it hasn't been Finn Russell. It's been the forward pack winning these games for them. And they've beaten France already.
It's true.
And they should be buoyant and confident about their ability to do it again. And that goes for the defence as well.
Yeah. And I think just the one final point on the defence is obviously the back three pendulum minded by Hogg. You will need to mind for some probing kicks. But I think actually more to the point is you kind of have to expect that Vakatawa will get some plays off and manage to get outside your centres. So there will be some tackling responsibility on your Darcy Grahams, your Van der Merves and your Hoggs. And they have been a little soft on occasion in that exact capacity, either like particularly Hogg retreating, not the tackle but retreating after the bouncing ball over his own line. He's been at his least assured in that exact scenario.
He had the two tries conceded in the Six Nations, and then wasn't there a moment last week?
Yeah, he got carried it back over because he didn't want to put himself in. Like, he looks shaky there, and France will try and probe outside those channels, try and isolate those wingers and pull Hogg out of his position. So they'll the pendulum will be important for kicks, but also they will have to expect to need to make tackles to shut down these plays at the last second, because as you say, France are going to look to get wide, so they can't be shocked when they get wide. That'll be criminal for them to not be expecting the French flooding of the wide channels with some numbers.
For sure.
But then we move on to the set piece, which will obviously be an interesting dynamic. The Scottish scrum has been imperious all year, has been taking names all year, but a huge factor in that is it's been Rory Sutherland scrumming aggressively. It has. And he is gone.
I have been a big fan of Ollie Cowell for years.
Oh, he's very good.
He's come into the Scotland squad now. He's qualified through residency.
Yeah.
I think he can make plays in there. I also think that this big man Xander Fagerson is an excellent scrummager himself.
He can lock it down from tight head.
I don't think lock it down. I think they can and will try and go at the French scrum.
I hope so.
I think they've had one of the best scrums in Europe all year. They have a mighty strong engine room, as well as big strong props. They're a team that scrums to attack now at this point, and scrums for penalties, and I don't expect that to change. I expect them to double down and really go for it.
Yeah, but I similarly expect France to be trying to do so as well. Their pack can be dangerous. I think their props can scrummage aggressively too.
Yeah, I don't see France getting on top in the scrum. Maybe. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. In fact, I think Scotland, France, have a good scrum, and they could well lock it down, and it could be a non-factor, which I think is what France will go for. I don't think they're going to try and and try and get the better of the Scottish pack there. I think Xander Fagerson might be the best tight head scrummager in Europe, as well as Rory Sutherland being the best loose head scrummager.
Might be. It's definitely an interesting dynamic. It is a shame about Rory Sutherland. We are big fans of him on the podcast.
No question. It's definitely a weakness, but I still think that the Scots should absolutely be going to scrum for penalties, in my mind anyway.
Fair enough. Yeah, sure. Then the line out as well has actually been good for both sides, I think, and Scotland have rotated their hookers and it's still been pretty good for them. And,
most consistent dart throwers perhaps.
Yeah, and similarly France have, between the Marchand-Chat combination, 2 world-class hookers and a load of line-out jumpers. Their back row all jump for it, and their row, they really do try and mix it up, and both of them like to launch from that set piece in the middle third, get their backs involved, and then the line out maul becomes a factor in the 22. It becomes a big factor.
France probably won't go to it that often,
no, they won't.
But Scotland will.
So how's France maul defence going? How is Bernard Leroux or Willemse planning to stifle this maul? That's a question mark for me.
Aldrich is often the guy they put into that role, trying to pick his way through.
And, he does do a good front crawl through the maul, which is a lovely a winning technique.
Important skill, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if teams can defend it. I think with both sides, I think there's potential for the set piece to be kind of combative and prickly and stop, start and changing. But I think if one side is to start to edge all of these little areas, I think a key maul try or something could be what breaks the back of this game for either side. I don't know which.
I think there's a good chance that this game is slow and physical and neither side's getting the edge, as has been the case with many Scotland games in recent times, and then clutch play one way or the other is what wins it.
Yeah, and I think it could come from set piece, because I think there'll be chop and change around the 60-minute mark as well. I think the third quarter there could be some big game-breaking kind of score for either side, and it'll be just curious to see who's getting on top in those exchanges. But we'll move on to France, and from France's visiting perspective, when they have the ball, what are they planning to do? I'd imagine they'd want to move these Scots around. They don't want to run in the tight.
They want to probe at the wide channels. Yeah. I mean, France have had this. They were brilliant against Ireland. In terms of doing this, they stand very deep. Their passing is very crisp. They exploit. They were very good at exploiting inexperienced shooters. And I think there was one occasion when at the start of the game when Sexton took on the role of shooter in the Irish line. Yeah. Just took a step to the inside, shrugged him off, moved the ball on. There was space. Yeah. Fiku gets the ball, checks the run of Andrew Porter, and away he goes. Yeah. And that's all. Like, their instincts are so sharp that just giving them the one-on-one matchups in the wide channels is often enough. Yeah. Exactly right. So it's about, like, even off first and second phase, moving that ball wide, but then crucially with guys like Vakatawa picking short lines through the middle of the Scots. So if Scotland are trying to drift, they can prepare to have to make a hefty tackle on someone running a serious line.
Sit down Harris, who's probably their most physical backline defender, sit him down and create the space.
So just running those little shapes, getting the Scots to sit down, and then rapido are away, and they tend to pack those wide channels with players, all of whom have flair and ability. That's their picture. Their offense is raw skill and raw width.
It is,
and it's beautiful to watch at its best, and bloody difficult to stop, because they've got a potent combination of speed, vision, offloading, and physicality.
Yes, well, as I was thinking with it in terms of that physicality, guys like Olivon Leroux, Aldrit and Willemse will need to be mobile around the park, because resourcing that offensive breakdown, whatever about your defensive breakdown, but offensive breakdown will be, like, Scotland will be trying to harry them there at source. Yep. So there is an onus on, like, even if you do get wide and you nearly get through, be there to resource that next breakdown.
They should have somebody with a mind to watching Hamish Watson.
The whole time on clear out mode. Because they have danger. Scotland are a danger. Even if you make a half break, you can get yourself isolated, and Scotland love that. They love turning it over because it saps the momentum from you. Can't allow that to happen. So big pack leaders need to be mobile and up for that. And then after that, like, it's mainly through Dupont and whoever is in to fill into Mac's shirt. It's getting that, switching the point of contact, keeping that quick ruck ball.
Yeah, Dupont runs it so well. He knows where the space is. He knows where the defence is weak.
And then probably run a little to sit the line down before giving it wide as well. They sit
depending on what he sees. Like, he's got great vision, and they play with flow, and they are really in sync with one another as an offense these days.
It's true.
And with Dupont leading the way, so he can go blind or open depending on what he sees, and he's always a danger on the line as well. So that's an absolute handful for a Scottish defence, and that's what it has to be from France. It's important they just keep the tempo up and keep the belief in themselves to move the ball, and to really probe, and even if it doesn't happen for them in the first 20 minutes, it'll come.
Have faith that it will.
Exactly. And if Scotland are having a poor offense by comparison, they do need to punish them with tries. They do need to put tries on the board, especially away from home. Just plant those seeds of doubt and build up a score that the Scots can't respond to if their offense is struggling and it's taking them a bit more bludgeoning work to score tries. That's what they did with Ireland. Like, they got into a shootout with a team. Ireland were a team who are slow at scoring, not dissimilar to this Scottish team at the moment. And they ended up just outdoing them in the shootout by racking up the scores, putting the scoreboard pressure on them.
They did the same against Wales the week prior. They've been racking up scores and putting the pressure on, so their offense is kind of their pivotal point. But ideally, they want to find their flow. They sometimes do struggle, as we've said, in Murrayfield to find that same flow. Sometimes the passes
they are going to be cold as well.
They'll be a little colder. They'll need to be.
They've got to rise to that challenge.
They do.
Like,
they got to accept that, not be surprised by it, certainly not be shocked by it, and be ready to play their game against these Scots. And
because they should believe in themselves that they are one of the best teams out there, and this is a real. Like, it's a really good challenge for France. They're going away from home to a team that's got 5 wins on the bounce, who beat them earlier in the year, the only blemish on their season so far. And they have a chance to put it right. It's a great challenge. They're a difficult team. They're always niggly and tough and physical. But France have a supremely talented team at the moment, and are going to be quicker and more skillful than their opponents, and they should put them to bed. So it's a proper challenge for their attack.
It is for their attack. As for their defence, like, we know they'll have to front up physically. We know they'll have to match the Scottish runners on the line. They know Scotland are going to bring a lot off 9, so they need to pack that channel and be cohesive and aggressive, abrasive in the contact. We know that they don't have the out and out poach men until Shaq comes on in the second half usually. Target the pill in the contact, try and make that scrappy. If it's a little slippery,
you're looking to get Scotland frustrated essentially. Like, Scotland are great when they get tempo going, and when they get when their like centres are picking hard lines, and then they can get quick ball around the corner. But everything's a little bit more stunted without Hastings or Russell in there at 10. And so if they can get out of the line and chop the Scots down and not allow them to get any sort of dominant carries going on offense, fronting up to the likes of Johnny Gray and Cummings as well when they're going around the corner, Scotland will slow it up and kick a box kick, and then it's on the back three to get it.
Well, it's first field it, but then you can transition, which is where they want to be. Like guys like Vanson, I think Vanson should be shooting up and in on the 10 channel, because, as you say, Finn's not there. Pressure that pass so that you do force them a bit more narrow, and then you have your likes of Aldred or Olivon who are pacey off the line. Just shut down that space, and really do pressure the 10 channel, because shy of that Finn over the top, like an out to in blitz is not a bad thing to bring against Scotland right now when they don't have the threat of that Finn Russell over the top pass. So I think it could be a matter of just be cohesive, be aggressive, be hard off the line, and try and coach kicks out of this Scotland team. If you can get this Scotland team kicking to you, then you're one step closer to your goal, which is just having the ball and having fun with it, attacking them.
100%. In terms of predictions, in terms of how we think this one is going to go, away in Murrayfield for France, how do you feel they're set?
I actually have a sneaking suspicion France might win this. It's a
sneaking suspicion. I mean, I'd say they're favourites, aren't they?
They might be now with Finn out of it. I think they are going to win it. I think the Scots are a little rattled after last week. I'd be very impressed if they can hold it together and impose themselves up front again on this French team and just punish them in the wind and the misery of Edinburgh. Make it a kind of an Edinburgh showing. I would be impressed, but I actually think this France team are just I have a lot of time for them. I think they're motoring on. I think they're buoyed by confidence, and I think they will have a bone to pick here. And I expect they will come.
I think they were hungry to play Fiji last week, and I expect them to bring some of that hunger. Is one of the things you'd said is that in the context of this 4-year World Cup cycle, you expect to see less of France being just dialed out.
I don't expect to see it as often at all.
In terms of how it's going to go, it's hard to know. Will the Scots bring the frustrating game that they can bring? Maybe they will. Maybe they'll make it ugly enough, and then it's anybody's game. But I think on the balance of it, on the evidence of what we've seen in recent times, I think France will have the clutch play in them, especially without a crowd for some reason in Murrayfield.
It changes the
dynamic.
dynamic.
Not quite the same as the French on the road usually. But it could be. I mean, that's still a big question mark.
No, I've seen French sides put in poor showings in Scotland before.
Like their two games against Ireland and Wales were at home.
Yeah.
And I believe their victory over England was at home.
That's true. They definitely travelling French thing.
A road win against a team that's in form would be a significant milestone for a French team, because it's still an area they really struggle with. So yeah, I'm jostling between two positions. I'll say it'll be tight, but France will pull off a winning score after Scotland fail to recognise that they need to get one more score to win a game. France steal it away from them. So that's what I'll say. I'll say about a 2-point win for France.
Ooh, okay.
Stealing it at the death.
I'm going to push it out a little. I'll say about an 8-point win for France.
Okay.
And a disappointing showing from Scotland.
Maybe.
Maybe it might be 6 in a row. There might
6 in a row. Like they're at home. That is a factor.
It is. I think it's a tight one. I think it's a very, very good game, to be honest, between two good sides. So yeah. More rugby to look forward to.
Yeah, in this monster weekend of international rugby. And listen, that does wrap up the Autumn Nations Cup.
It does.
We do have a bit of due diligence to do in the test arena, though.
Yes, we do. We will move on to Portugal and Brazil. Who knew this was happening? Well, we did, of course. Where there's a two test tour going on, and the Brazilians have just left with their squad. Have left Brazil for Portugal, where they will be playing them twice over the next couple of weeks. The first of them takes place this Saturday, 21st, 3 p.m. kickoff, which is a silly time because it's clashing with something else.
There's a lot about this that's a bit silly. Yeah, it kicks off at the exact same moment as the Ireland-England game does, which is a bit rubbish from our point of view. We'd have been curious to watch it, and hopefully there's still a mechanism by which we can watch it back.
Yeah, well, we might be at the mercy of the highlights guys. Are there going to be good highlights on YouTube? Or
I don't know. It's to be broadcast by something called Rugby TV, which is hosted by Portugal's website. It's hard to know. I mean, it's a bit of a tangent, but it's sad to see how poorly advertised and how poorly broadcast Tier 2 rugby is at the moment. Yeah. We live in the weeds, and it takes work to find out that these games are even going on.
Yeah, much less find prep for it.
I would give a shout out to the Americas. I think it's called the Americas Rugby News, who do a pointed good job of reporting on Tier 2 stuff, and they're the guys from whom you find out any information on this stuff. Tier 2 Rugby blog on Twitter is a useful follow as well. But by and large, in terms of reporting and information on this Tier 2 stuff, it's poorly advertised, it's poorly broadcast. It's like almost at times like they're actively trying to hide it from you.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Portugal Rugby Union presumably does not have the following where it can demand that everybody go to their website, etc., and give them or bolster them that way. These games need to be broadcast on Facebook Live. They need to not be clashing with the biggest rugby game of the week, and they need to be advertised and marketed. I'm not sure. One would hope. Obviously, we're living in Ireland, but there's a bit of this going on in Portugal or in Brazil, etc. But they need to be broadcast publicly, and people need to be allowed to see them and engage with them, and spreading the sport in these countries. It does do my head in a little bit that their broadcasting and even the website interface is just so poor. That you would think just a little bit of media savvy, not even money, just a little bit of savvy would go a long way.
Yeah. Well, sure, like what the PNC used to do by broadcasting them, as you say, on Facebook
way better,
Live.
Way better. Yeah, Facebook Live and YouTube Live. That was always a great competition for us. So I'd love to see Portugal and Brazil do that. But the game itself has its own dynamics, not to be blown off course by that.
Indeed, a little segue that needs to be said, because it was a scrap to put together a little preview for this game because we had to scramble for information.
Yes, basically. It is to be a lovely game. It's going to be in Portugal. They're having nice weather. It's going to be perfect 19 degree heat and windless and sunny. It's going to be nice over there.
Played in Lisbon, Rugby do Jamor.
I looked it up. It's just a field.
It's just a field, okay. But it'll be a sunny field.
It's very close to their national stadium, but it's not the national stadium. It's a field.
Right.
But that's where they're going to play the game. There is an interesting few dynamics to this. Los Lobos, as Portugal are called, have a 2-2 record, 2 wins, 2 losses against Brazil. And one would suspect this series is going to be a tight one. I mean, Portugal qualified for the World Cup in 2007, but have since fallen off a cliff somewhat, and they've returned to Rugby Europe this season from the second tier after being in that like abyss of a place where you're playing the likes of Latvia and Poland, so etc.
Good to see them have too much for that shower and are back up to playing.
They came into Rugby Europe this year. They had a 39-24 defeat against Georgia, which is a good showing.
Good showing in that comp,
A 1-point defeat to Russia. Then secured victories over Belgium and Romania before their final game against Spain was cancelled.
So they're taking a bit of form in. Obviously, that's a while ago.
That's a coming nation. That's a nation that's moving up, you know.
The Wolves love it.
100%.
Brazil, meanwhile, in terms of form, they have more recent games under their belt, obviously, but they lost all of them.
They did.
They were 0-3 in the Americas Cuatro Nacionales, or the Sudamericanos Cuatro Nacionales, whatever it is.
South American
Four Nations, as it's called. But yes, they were defeated by Chile, Argentina 15 and Uruguay. They were kind of nowhere. Their discipline was a mess.
That's what it was. I mean, they do tend to bring a slower, more kicking oriented game than your average South American team. So they're less likely in that regard to be shocked by some of the physical plays perhaps that the European teams have, and more likely maybe to impose themselves in that way on Portugal. But, as you say, what killed them was the discipline. It was penalty after penalty. In all of their defeats, it was penalty after penalty. And that's something that they're going to have to look at. But they do have some slick operators. Duque, who we have up there from 12.
He's one to watch out for
kicked
sure.
some nice drop goals, got some nice flicky out the back passes. He had some good highlight reel moments. Just little nuggets from both of these nations. It's another game that... Like, we were given out about how this stuff is advertised and broadcast, but it is great that it's going ahead.
It's true, for sure. And to be honest, the South American teams have done a really good job of getting rugby happening among the Tier 2 ones, and this is a really good tour. 2-match tour, well, obviously a game this weekend, and then one the following Saturday.
I like the coming dynamic of Tier 2 sides from South America and Europe starting to play each other.
That's brilliant, it needs to happen.
I like
it. Because obviously like the speed of the South American game needs to impose itself
on
Rugby
Europe.
This is
what the November window needs to be about.
Yes.
You have your America's competition during Six Nations Rugby Championship-esque time, and your Rugby Europe, etc., and whatever other regional competitions you're going to have, and then in November play teams of your own level from across the world.
Yes,
that's what it needs to be about.
Yes, so it's another little microcosm of hopefully the future of this November window, close to right, if not entirely, but this is definitely a positive thing. So Portugal v Brazil, it's more commonly a football game.
Yes,
but it'll be
a bigger deal in the football.
It might have been a bigger deal, but it'll be interesting to see them go hammer and tongs at it, and I'm curious to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. Two coming nations.
Absolutely. And we will move on because there is more international rugby to cover. We had England women and the French women were playing a game last weekend. It may have passed you by, but it was the English who've taken the spoils. This is another 2-test series.
Yes.
However, the first test in France finished France 10, England 33, which kind of diminishes possibly the second test a little, and you would think hopes are a little lower in France's camp. It's always great to see these two sides play. They do so every year in the Six Nations. They are the two flying the flag of professional rugby, women's professional rugby in the Europe, Six Nations. So they are two sides that always have my utmost respect. It seems like England are edging this battle in recent times.
Well,
they really are.
England are sort of standard setters, I would say, in the women's game now. Obviously, New Zealand can get them, but I mean, they've done a tremendous job. I give the RFU enormous credit. Obviously they have the resources to do it, which is helpful.
Yeah. You always see, I always check results every year or every weekend, and it's just good to see like Harlequins women playing and all this. The English Premiership gives a lot of contracts to some of the Irish players as well. They are really flying the flag for the women's professional game.
Creating a league is obviously massive, but they've spearheaded professional 15s rugby really from the get go. And made it happen even when it wasn't happening organically. And while that has created this dynamic that the unions with less resources are struggling to compete against the Red Roses, it is just fantastic to see them take the game to another level, which they have done.
For sure.
And the rest of the game might be slow in catching up, but it's no bad thing, even if it does create some frustrating years of one side dominating the game, especially in Six Nations with all the other nations struggling. moving the game on to another level and a new standard is never a bad thing, and nobody you shouldn't let people tell you that it's a bad thing to see the game moving on. Whether it's any team dominating, whether it's the Crusaders or anyone else, it's not a bad thing. When teams get on top, it raises the standard. It does. And I always
hate that facile argument of like, oh, break them up or something, split them up, bring them all back down to our level. Like, no, raise them up to that level. They have paved the way to professional rugby and set the standard every step of the way. And even now, to this day, they are playing at a level that the women's game hasn't seen. I think I'd say the English game of this year might be the best women's team ever. It might be.
And likewise, probably the team next year will be better than any team before as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So they get
the
a huge
Black Ferns might have a bone to pick with that, but we'll see.
The Black Ferns are good too, but I mean, I would say England are the standard setters.
I think so too, as far as professionalism.
But the French are good too. It is a fun game, and it's going to be broadcast on the BBC, which, lest we forget, this weekend, the second test.
Yes, it is going to be taking place in Twickenham. Curtain raiser for the Autumn Nations clash in the afternoon as well, so that's good. Have it on the same ticket, and as you say, broadcast on BBC. In stark contrast to some of the Tier 2 stuff, this is being made readily available free to air,
which is great. 100%.
So with that, we will just pivot on from the international game. We have a few club matters to tidy up. We have our ongoing coverage of Super Rugby Unlocked, which is finally coming to an end, I think, this weekend.
Yes, this is the last round.
We had 2 games last week because the Lions game with the Pumas was cancelled for COVID reasons. The Griquas and the Sharks played out a game.
They did. This was a brilliant game. I mean, honestly, I enjoyed the hell out of this game. I watched it. It was a curtain raiser in my world for the Ireland-Wales game on Friday night.
It worked out as such.
And there was an absolutely ding-dong battle. The Griquas showed up. It was relentlessly physical. I mean, the Sharks were sloppy at times, but did bring that physicality and didn't want to lose the game. But then the Griquas were making them. They were making them make mistakes. They were making huge tackles, huge carries. It was without question their best showing in the competition so far. And great to see their coaching staff were getting supremely excited. And then towards the end of the game, the Sharks came back into it, scored a try, got it back to a 1-score game. And then, to be fair to him, Kerwin Bosch is really gone from strength to strength
his
now.
His clutch is good, isn't it?
Yeah, his clutch is great. He's got a
probably
great
his best
mind
asset.
Yeah, 100%. He kicks to win games from miles away and loves it.
Yeah.
And he did it again, and he broke the Griquas' hearts. And
34-33.
It was sad to see all those Griquas men looking so disconsolate with the outcome because they'd put so much into the game. But a great escape from Sharks, who are showing some nous without their Springboks. They're showing some nous in terms of getting some results, while obviously their general standard has dipped, but they still have hustle.
Yes,
and they hustled their way to a good win here. With Kerwin Bosch looking great.
Good to see. And then the other game, the Stormers kind of finally clicked for the first time all season. We kind of saw the Stormers' potential. Their halfbacks looking good.
It was Herschel and Willemse playing well for the first time in ages. It was a breath of fresh air. I mean, they were just reminding us that
the Stormers are formidable.
These guys were in the Springbok camp last year. These guys have World Cup gold medals. And haven't really seen it. Well, Gallant is coming. Gallant is on the way. Like, he was brilliant. Every touch was mesmeric. He was trying things. He was so deadly on counter-attack. He was linking up. His offload game was stellar. And finally, people are saying in the context this week of the Pumas winning that Razzie was full of crap when he was saying they needed game time to warm up. But actually, with the disjointed nature of the South African side coming from everywhere and had some players with COVID, etc., and these guys playing rugby from so long without playing rugby in Super Rugby Unlocked, I think you're seeing what he was saying coming true, in that if there was a rugby championship starting 1st of December, he would have been game for it, because these guys are finding form now, and you can tell that. And they looked, the Stormers looked sensational. Unfortunately for the Cheetahs, it came at the wrong time.
Yeah, they kind of looked a little rough. We were saying it last week. They started like a house on fire in the first week. Yeah, they've kind of been declining slowly but surely, and
it's kind of as we suspected. They had a fire lit under their ass by the
exclusion from the Pro 14 or Pro 16, whatever it'll be. But it was kind of unfair and basis. And they're still sitting fourth in the table. They are not the fifth best team in
although
this
the Lions have a couple of games that they had suspended.
This is true.
Cancelled.
This is true. No, they were definitely,
including their game against the Cheetahs, actually. So that would have been
probably a decider.
But
it finished that game 30-13 to the Stormers at Newlands, and it was probably about that.
That was a fair result.
That was about
but some excellent tries in there, and Gallant in particular, I thought was excellent.
One of the standouts. And just to run through the standings as we go into the final week, we have the Bulls sitting. All teams played 5 apart from the Pumas.
That's right, because the Pumas and the Lions, they haven't yet announced that game as a 0-0 draw,
but
they will be. So the Lions have to bye this week as well.
And they could just give 28-0 win to someone. So the Bulls are sitting atop with 19 points. The Stormers are in second with 17. The Sharks just behind, also on 17, just missing out on, I think, points difference.
Cheetahs on 12.
The Cheetahs on 12, a bit of a gap there. Lions on 10, Pumas on 5, and Griquas on 3. So no donuts on points at all. There have been points.
There's a donut on Griquas for wins.
Griquas have had no wins.
About to chalk it off.
Close to getting one, but no. So it's pretty tightly contested. The difference is, though, the fixtures this weekend, the final round of fixtures before the Super Rugby Unlocked continues into the Curry Cup.
Yes.
But as far as Super Rugby Unlocked, the Bulls are in a great place. The first game of the weekend is Cheetahs v Griquas at Free State Stadium. That's Saturday, 2:30 kickoff local time. All of the games are on Saturday.
That's not local time, I don't think.
That's
GMT. I think local time is an hour ahead.
Sorry, that's our time.
Local to us.
Local to us, that's what I meant. Then the game, the Bulls have a home game against the Pumas at Loftus.
Which if they win,
they have it.
And then the Sharks play the Stormers then as well, also on Saturday afternoon.
Which is probably the best fixture of those, even if it's a dead rubber after the Bulls have already wrapped it up.
The dynamic is that the Bulls have all they need to do to claim the competition is to best a Rudolphless, Fushless Pumas team. Pumas have shown great heart.
Yes,
what I will say
and
is
some
that
good hustle.
Good hustle.
Yeah, they have Van den Bank. Their centre is awesome. Tinnis de Beer, I think, is on their team.
That's Griquas.
That's Griquas. Sorry, I just wanted to give a shout out to Tinnis de Beer because I think it's my favourite name in the whole competition.
It is. It's fantastic.
A few tins of beer now.
Tinnis de Beer.
I think the Pumas might be outmatched, as you say, without Fouche and without Rudolph, who has now jumped ship and is now a Cheetah. The Pumas may be outgunned there, but the Bulls, to be honest, have looked the better side. They
have deserved it, no question. They've been the best team in the competition. They've responded superbly to that early defeat against the Cheetahs, with physically dominant performances against all 3 of their top rivals.
Yes,
the Lions,
their Springboks have stood up, has been the main difference, like you were saying in the early weeks.
What about him?
Brilliant at 13.
Man.
Yeah. No, they've looked pretty slick in terms of executing when they've had their chances, but it's been mostly just good savvy, good game management, good physicality. It's been a competition of Springboks and not Springboks in many ways. You've seen the guys who were in Razzie's World Cup winning team being a standout in whatever.
With the exception of Gallant, who stepped up, I think, to that level. That's the guy I would point out. Should the Pumas shock the Bulls, if that supremely surprising outcome was to come about, the Sharks-Stormers game would function as like a cup final.
Then it would, yes.
The Sharks have struggled in recent times to come to grips with the loss of so many of their usual players.
Yes, it's true.
Van Heerden and Boutelese are doing like 90% of the work of their whole pack.
Yes.
Their backline obviously is missing the likes of although it's good to see Nkosi back, although sad to see his hair shaved.
That's true.
But great to see Nkosi back in action, and his form will only improve with game time as well. And Kerwin has clutch. The Stormers are arriving at first gear, and they have a supremely excellent mixture of tough carrying forwards and lovely running backs.
Yes.
So you would expect that they might be the side best equipped to dismantle the Bulls as we move into the Curry Cup.
Yes,
anyway,
this is true. The long form, the long game is the Curry Cup, which probably has a bit more prestige. But we expect that the Bulls will probably be crowned Super Rugby Unlocked champions at the end of this weekend. So it all happens on Saturday, the final round of fixtures for this section of the South African domestic season.
Yes, indeed.
With that, we will move on to more club rugby. We move a little closer to home. The big news, I suppose, this weekend is that the Premiership returns, and Premiership will be back with Newcastle joining it coming up from the Championship, and Sarri's obviously out, having been relegated due to their
Sarri's lost Premiership.
Yes, indeed. So the new tournament will kick off with Queens v Exeter on Friday night at the Stoop. And I see you have probably Wasps Bristol is the sexiest fixture of the weekend.
100%.
Yeah. They're both lovely attacking teams, both
game,
finals in the final four last season.
Wasps Bristol's a great game, and that's at 1 p.m. on Sunday. The Pro 14 also continues to rumble on as we enter week 7 of the competition. The Irish dominance has not subsided, it's fair to say.
Although Connacht did get defeated by Scarlets at home, which was a good win for Scarlets and a bad loss for Connacht.
It was definitely a bad loss for Connacht, but Ulster, Munster and Leinster managed to rack up impressive bonus point victories.
Both Ulster and Leinster scored 50.
Marcel Coetzee scored 4 tries.
Awesome. And his man lummed the match.
One thing I will say about the Pro 14, it's an aside, but as a Leinster fan, I thought we actually put on our best performance, arguably of many, like months, I would say, and it was like there was this supreme offensive showcase of a performance where every pass was sticking. They played slick attacking rugby and worked around Edinburgh's pack and never let them make it a scrap, and scored some brilliant tries.
Every try was a real try.
I'm just gutted that the highlights are so bad. It's something that really does irritate me, because I would love to watch like 10-minute highlights of that game, but the Pro 14 channel insists on making them like 3 minutes. They're highlights designed for people who, like, I've only got 3 minutes to watch a rugby game. Could you please show me the end of a try? Show me who got a yellow card, but don't show me the incident. All of that stuff like just make you crazy watching the highlight reels. That is a shame that we don't have proper highlights for that game, because it was such a class one. But by and large, the usual narrative is continuing Irish dominance. The stat of the week that reflects that is that Cardiff are the only non-Irish side in the competition who actually have a positive points differential in terms of points scored versus points conceded, and they're travelling to Dublin this week to play Leinster, so
that might be scrubbed out fairly sharpish. So I know that is the night and day difference in this in the Pro 14. It does need to be remedied, as we said last week, and we'll continue to say. Some team other than Leinster, maybe a little bit of Ulster, but some team other than an Irish team needs to start playing some quality football now. In his tournament.
Does need to happen.
It really does need to happen.
The Top Tours also enters its 10th week of the season, would you believe? Tabletop toppers La Rochelle suffered an ugly defeat at the hands of Stade Francais in Paris, but they do still hold their place at the summit, and they're going to be hosting the European finalist Racing, and that's the game of the weekend on Sunday evening.
Yeah, that is a very interesting dynamic game on Sunday evening, for sure. I suppose we will wrap up our European rugby segment and move on to our final segment of the week, our rugby news of the week, which is our usual way to end the show, and there is a little bit of news. First off, we have the Mitre 10 Cup, in terms of sticking vaguely with domestic rugby. That enters the postseason now. It's playoff time.
We have championship and premiership, which is
there's the two
important
divisions.
Yes, the two divisions over there. Semi-finals taking place in both. So the New Zealand season is firmly wrapping up now after coming back post-COVID.
It's been a mighty success, I might say. I think they might have been, as well as their COVID response, their season response has been awesome. Between Super Rugby Aotearoa and now the North-South game that was such a spectacle, leading into the Bledisloe, into this Rugby Championship, and the Mitre 10 as well. It's been a triumph, really, the way New Zealand have got rugby back and have kept it going even throughout this whole pandemic.
The games in question, Auckland are playing Waikato. That's in the proper Premiership semi-final. Auckland table toppers in that department, and then I believe the other game, I just have to double check. The interface is so bad. Yes, it's Bay of Plenty against Tasman. Is the other semi-final, and those games are on cruel hours from our point of view. Saturday at 1 a.m. from GMT,
that might be doable.
And Saturday at 6 a.m.
Less doable.
How doable is the 1 a.m. game if you're getting up at 8:45 to watch the Australia-Argentina game?
We'll have to find out. It's obviously not our main priority, but it is good to see that the playoffs are finally happening in a Mitre 10, and good season.
2 more weeks of Mitre 10 footy, and then the Kiwi season is officially over.
They'll finish their game against Argentina, and that'll be it. In other somewhat negative news, obviously Italy aren't playing this week, but Jake Pelletri is out for a number of months and in need of surgery after an injury he sustained in the defeat against Scotland last week. obviously terrible news for him, for Gloucester, who are getting their Premiership season underway, and just the game in general, because he's been in tremendous form.
No, he's a great player.
Yeah.
He's great. He was making Parise-esque plays out there for Italy. He was he actually was taking on the mantle of Brand Staines' form had dipped, and he was becoming the real form player in that back row.
Yeah.
So a bit of a hammer blow for Italy as well.
For sure,
and
one of their genuinely elite players, and obviously it's a shame to see
just wishing him all the best as well. He's a joy to watch in the game, and let's hope that he comes back on the mend as good and as strong as ever, and we get to see him out sooner rather than later.
That's the hope. In other news, Jordan Murphy finally departs from Leicester Tigers after however many years it's been.
2001.
That's when he joined.
It's 19 years of service, you might say.
He has definitely been a servant of Leicester Rugby. It's just been a poor fit, the coaching tenure, I think.
I mean, he was a sensational player for them. 100%. A brilliant captain, a legend of the club. But he was also, it's a shame to say, but he was also a problem in Leicester. Like his attitude was very strange. He's bullish and all about being, more and more physical, and just getting the angry, abrasive attitude that can only take you so far. You're not winning games.
Missing the big trends of the game, and missing the big trends of even the league, and meanwhile kind of treading water above the relegation zone.
It's no solution for Leicester to get rid of him any more than it was a solution to get rid of Matt O'Connor without having the actual institutions.
They do need to have.
They need some good coaching, and they need some better just general institutions over there. They're obviously in a mad way with the serious form dip that they've gone through. It's a big club, and one hopes that this is an opportunity, that this paves the way for new blood and new thinking to come into Leicester, because they don't belong in the doldrums in which they dwell at the moment.
It's true. They're a more prestigious, more historic club than that, and hopefully they can start to get new thought in there and start the recovery process. Then in other news, we did mention this briefly earlier on in the podcast, but Sale players officially exonerated of any wrongdoing in relation to their COVID outbreak within the camp.
Yeah,
it was due to a false negative, I believe.
That's
right. Precipitated throughout the thing. Nothing to do with Mancunian house parties or any of the other.
Yeah, as Steve Diamond very rightly pointed out, and he called out a few names. Pat Lam had a potshot comment at them. Hugo Monnier on BT Sport had a potshot comment on them. Is utterly irresponsible and beyond callous and stupid to start taking potshots at a team for contracting COVID. You haven't the first idea as to whether or not it's as a result of any
wrongdoing at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a pretty random virus. Yeah. Obviously, if you're having discos in the basement, you're going to be more likely to get it. But it can happen anyway. It can happen. One false negative is all it takes.
It's disappointing. Yeah. There's no, obviously you don't. Not everyone's a journalist, but a little bit of journalistic integrity. Like you don't, particularly the ones who published it. But it's like you don't just level accusations before and then try and root around for evidence. I know Trump does, but you don't do that. Like you need to actually, if you're going to say anything like this, have it be based, because you don't want to end up punishing teams for getting COVID. Because the net result is that
materially that's what's happened, and the Premiership can talk about their return as a great success, but it is an injustice that they were so determined to play all their games that they couldn't reschedule and allow a Sale team who were set to make the playoffs for the first time in forever to actually play their semi-final, because you decided that them getting COVID was enough reason just to cut them out of the competition. They couldn't play their game against Worcester, so they didn't qualify. That was definitely disappointing. Great to see that the truth comes to light, and they aren't in any way to blame or in the wrong. And in fact, there was an article in Rugby Pass with Vaf de Klerk, and he was saying he actually had some pretty bad symptoms from it. He was feeling he was feeling very ill for at least a week, and then he kind of came back. And then when he finally came back into training, he was actually very slow. He felt himself like not quite right, not feeling like he has the energy that he usually has or should have. And thankfully, he's now saying in pre-season he's felt it back, and he feels back himself. But he's saying like it took a long while to get over it.
Yeah, it's not no joke, and it's certainly not something to be.
So the first thing you need to be thinking when you hear that guys are getting COVID is just wishing them well. And obviously, we wish Faf well and all those guys, and it's great to see them 100%. Back on the field.
And then in other news, World Rugby news, we have Joe Lejuge announced as head of match officials, which I think he was he was certainly up there anyway. I know Nigel and Wayne.
Another step up for Joel. Joel people might remember, old school ref from the aughts, long retired. But it's good to see a decent head getting in charge. He annoyed some people, but actually I never thought he was the worst. In fact, given the crop of French refs that has arisen in the last decade,
we wouldn't give for a Georges right about now on the pitch.
He's pretty good. Yeah. So him as head of match officials is definitely probably no bad thing.
Probably not. And then World Rugby, in other news, continues its global expansion with some new members, which is always nice.
This is
nice
to welcome. This is a fun bit of news to end the show with. We have Burkina Faso in Africa, Iran, and Laos have achieved World Rugby full member status, with Nepal and Panama becoming new associate members of the International Federation. So that increases membership unions in World Rugby to 128 unions across every continent as well.
Fantastic news.
Yeah,
love to see it. Love to see it.
I mean, long way to go for Burkina Faso.
Absolutely long way to go, but it all starts here. Nepal as well. They will be no strangers to a big climb. So yes, they will have to try and get in at the bottom, but come up. It's nice to see World Rugby that the doors are open, that there is a pathway for some of these teams, granted a long one. Yeah. But it's just great to see
128 unions. That's getting there. I mean, obviously the step up from tier 2 to tier 1 remains what it is,
and then the step from tier 2 to how far back you go.
Yeah, but I think that tier 2 has become bigger than tier 1, which is a good thing.
That is positive.
That actually the clump of nations, like we were seeing Portugal come through, and all of a sudden they're beating the Spains and Belgiums of the world. That there is actually an extended tier 2 that we need to get bigger, and then we need to sort of bridge that gap as well between tier 1. But definitely good to see rugby being played in all of these places around the world.
Just good to see world rugby being open to it, and inclusivity a big factor of the game. I'm delighted to see, and congratulations to all those nations. Welcome to our game.
100%.
So with that, I suppose we will wrap up the show.
There's not much else to say. We've said it all.
Yeah, it's been another long ass one, but we thank you for sticking with us if you have this long. Otherwise, for the people who've dipped in and out, you're probably dead right. For returning subs, we're very grateful to you as always. If you're new here as well, please do feel free to like and subscribe the video.
And send comments. We always love the comments. We're getting more and more of them. We're trying to respond to as many as we can. I know some slip through our fingers, but it's definitely always cool to see good conversation going on in the chat.
Yeah, that's what we're all about here at the Overlap. We want good quality rugby discourse. That's what we are. That's the mission statement. Yes,
100%. But without any further ado, we're going to have to leave you guys because we got to go sleep.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
You're up.
Oh, that was rubbish. Never even set myself.
No one jumped.
That was crap.
Crooked feed.
Oh my god. We should do that again.